My name is Ruby. 13 years ago, my parents forbade me from celebrating my 20th birthday because my older sister did not feel special enough. They threw my beautiful birthday cake in the trash and demanded I cancel my dinner plans to comfort her over a minor breakup. I packed my bags that very night and walked out into the freezing Chicago winter. They thought I would fail. They thought I would come crawling back begging for their financial support and their conditional love. Instead, I built a private empire they could not even comprehend. And when they finally tried to use me again to fund her fake luxury lifestyle, I did not just say no, I dismantled their entire world. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to stand up to family members who constantly underestimated your worth. I am 33 years old now, and for as long as I can remember, I have been the invisible daughter. Growing up in the affluent suburbs of Chicago, my parents, Patricia and Richard, maintained a flawless public image. They drove luxury cars, hosted elegant neighborhood dinners, and presented our family as a picture of absolute perfection. But behind the heavy oak doors of our home, the reality was suffocating. Every ounce of emotional and financial support was funneled directly to my older sister, Brittany. Brittany was the golden child. She was the one who could do no wrong, the one whose mediocre achievements were celebrated with lavish gifts, while my hard work was barely acknowledged. I learned early on that my role in the family was to be quiet, to be agreeable, and to serve as a convenient backdrop for Brittany to shine against. The reality of our family dynamic was on full display last Saturday night. My parents had invited me to an upscale steakhouse in downtown Chicago. I should have known better than to accept the invitation. We rarely saw each other, and when we did, it usually meant they needed something. But a small, foolish part of me still hoped that maybe this time would be different. Maybe at 33 years old I had finally earned a seat at their table as an equal. I was wrong. The restaurant was intimidatingly expensive. It was the kind of place where the lighting is intentionally dim, the leather booths swallow you whole, and the waiters move silently like shadows. The air smelled of aged wood, expensive cologne, and perfectly seared beef. I arrived exactly on time, wearing a simple black dress and keeping a low profile. Brittany arrived 20 minutes late, making a loud theatrical entrance that forced several other tables to turn and look. She was dripping in designer labels that I strongly suspected were counterfeit, and she immediately demanded the best seat at the table. Throughout the dinner, I sat quietly and observed. I ordered a modest chicken dish and a glass of tap water. I listened as my father Richard ordered the dry-aged tomahawk steak with extra sides of truffle macaroni and cheese. I watched my mother Patricia wave the sommelier over to our table with an imperious flick of her wrist. Brittany took charge of the wine list. She ordered 3 bottles of vintage champagne, insisting that we needed to celebrate her upcoming wedding properly. I did not drink a single drop of it. I simply smiled politely and focused on my food while they spent the next 2 hours talking exclusively about themselves. Brittany dominated the conversation, boasting about her life as a luxury real estate broker. She talked endlessly about the high-end properties she was supposedly showing, the elite clients she was entertaining, and the incredibly wealthy man she was engaged to marry. Her fiancé Harrison was absent that night, supposedly attending to vital business matters on the West Coast. My parents hung on her every word. They nodded enthusiastically, asking detailed questions about her wedding plans and praising her success. Every time I attempted to share a minor update about my own life, my mother would offer a brief, tight-lipped smile before immediately redirecting the attention back to Brittany. I had long ago stopped trying to convince them of my worth. They believed I was still the same struggling girl they had kicked out 13 years ago. They thought I made a meager living, running a small house cleaning service, barely scraping by in a tiny rented apartment. I never corrected them. I never told them that my house cleaning gig had evolved into a massive property management company and eventually into Pinnacle Estate Holdings. I never mentioned that I now controlled a highly lucrative firm catering to ultra-high net worth individuals, managing the very same multi-million-dollar estates that Brittany could only dream of selling. I kept my wealth and my success completely hidden. It was my armor against their constant judgment. As the plates were cleared away, and the final drops of the third bottle of champagne were poured into Brittany's glass, the waiter approached our table. He carried a heavy black leather folder containing the bill. He placed it neutrally in the center of the table right next to the flickering candle. The conversation suddenly died down. A heavy, expectant silence fell over my family. This was the moment the true purpose of the dinner would be revealed. My mother reached out and picked up the leather folder. She opened it slowly, her eyes scanning the itemized receipt. I watched her face, looking for any sign of hesitation, but there was none. She did not even blink at the total. With a smooth, practiced motion, she slid the folder across the white linen tablecloth, stopping exactly in front of my plate. I looked down at the receipt. The total, printed in bold black ink, was $1,200. I slowly looked up from the bill, meeting my mother's gaze. Patricia offered a patronizing smile, crossing her arms over her chest. "Since you are still single, renting, and only running that little house cleaning gig, you have fewer real expenses," she said, her voice carrying a tone of absolute authority. "Your sister is saving for her wedding, so you will cover this." The sheer audacity of her statement hung in the air. She was not asking me for a favor, she was issuing a command. She fully expected me to drain my bank account to pay for a luxurious feast I had barely participated in, just to subsidize my sister's lavish lifestyle. Richard did not look up from his coffee. Brittany simply inspected her manicured nails, a faint smirk playing on her lips. They had clearly planned this ambush. They assumed I would be too embarrassed to cause a scene in such a high-end restaurant. They assumed I would simply hand over my credit card to keep the peace, just as I had always done when I was younger. But I was no longer the frightened 20-year-old girl they had thrown out into the cold. I felt a profound sense of calm wash over me. My heart did not race. My hands did not shake. I did not feel the familiar sting of tears that used to accompany their cruelty. I just felt a cold, absolute clarity. I reached out and placed my hand on the leather folder. I looked at the $1,200 total one last time. Then I calmly closed the folder. I placed my fingertips on the smooth leather and pushed it back across the table directly in front of my mother. "I will pay for my chicken and my tap water," I said, my voice perfectly level and quiet enough that only our table could hear. "I am not paying for 3 bottles of vintage champagne I did not drink or a tomahawk steak I did not order." Patricia gasped, her hand flying to her chest in a dramatic display of shock. "You cannot be serious," she hissed, leaning forward across the table. Her eyes widened with genuine disbelief that I had dared to refuse her. "We are your family. You are being incredibly selfish right now." "I am being financially responsible," I replied, maintaining my calm demeanor. "You ordered the champagne, Mom. You can pay for it." The atmosphere at the table shifted instantly from performative celebration to palpable hostility. The illusion of a happy family dinner shattered, leaving behind the raw, ugly truth of their entitlement. They had brought me here solely to use me, and my refusal to play the role of the compliant victim had completely derailed their plan. I sat back in my chair, resting my hands in my lap, and waited for the inevitable explosion. Richard finally put his coffee cup down. He glared at me with the same disapproving scowl he had used to terrorize me during my childhood. "You are embarrassing us," he muttered, his voice low and threatening. "Do not make a scene in a place like this. Hand over your card right now." I looked him directly in the eye, refusing to look away or apologize. "There is no scene being made, Dad," I said softly. "I simply declined to pay a bill that is not mine. If you cannot afford the lifestyle you are performing tonight, you should not have booked the table." Brittany let out an exaggerated sigh, rolling her eyes toward the ceiling. She leaned forward, her fake diamond glittering under the dim restaurant lights, preparing to launch the next attack. The evening was about to escalate far beyond a simple unpaid dinner bill. Brittany let out a sharp laugh that sounded like shattering glass. She tossed her crisp linen napkin onto the table and glared at me with pure, unadulterated venom. "You are still bitter about that silly birthday party, are you not?" She crossed her arms, leaning back into the plush leather of the restaurant booth. "It has been 13 years, Ruby. For heaven's sake, grow up and stop punishing us just because you hold a grudge over something so incredibly trivial." The mere mention of that night sent a sudden cold wave crashing through my chest, pulling me violently backward through time. 13 years ago, the air in Chicago was biting cold, slicing through my thin jacket, but I had walked up the driveway to our suburban home with a warm, hopeful feeling blooming in my chest. It was my 20th birthday. I had spent the entire day working a grueling double shift at a local diner, saving every single penny just to pay for my college textbooks. I was physically exhausted, my feet aching from standing for hours. But I was smiling because my mother had promised we would have a small family dinner. She had promised to cut the vanilla buttercream cake she had ordered from my favorite neighborhood bakery. I had even invited 3 close friends to come over afterward to celebrate what was supposed to be a milestone evening. When I pushed open the heavy mahogany front door, the house was eerily silent. There were no lights glowing in the dining room. There was no comforting smell of dinner cooking in the kitchen. I walked down the long hallway, still wearing my winter coat, and stopped dead in my tracks when I reached the kitchen island. The beautiful vanilla buttercream cake with "Happy Birthday, Ruby" written in elegant pink icing was sitting upside down in the stainless steel garbage can. It was completely smashed, covered in wet coffee grounds and discarded food wrappers. I stood there staring at my ruined cake, trying desperately to comprehend what I was seeing. Then I heard the sound of loud, dramatic sobbing coming from the living room. I walked in to find Brittany sprawled across the expensive beige sofa, surrounded by a sea of used tissues. My mother was sitting beside her, gently stroking her hair and speaking in soothing, hushed tones. "What happened?" I asked, my voice trembling as I pointed a shaking finger toward the kitchen. "Why is my birthday cake in the trash?" Patricia looked up at me, and her expression instantly hardened into a mask of pure annoyance. "Keep your voice down," she snapped, gesturing aggressively to my weeping sister. "Brittany is going through a very difficult time right now. Jason just broke up with her." I looked between my mother and my sister, completely bewildered by the sheer absurdity of the situation. Jason was a guy Brittany had been casually dating for barely 3 weeks. "I am sorry she is sad," I said, trying desperately to keep my emotions in check. "But why did you throw away my cake, Mom? My friends are coming over in an hour to celebrate." "You need to call your friends and cancel," Patricia ordered, her tone leaving absolutely no room for negotiation or compromise. "We are not having a party tonight, Ruby. It is incredibly insensitive of you to even suggest celebrating when your sister is in so much pain. Your sister does not feel special enough today. Seeing you open presents and cut a cake is only going to make her feel worse about herself." I stood in the center of the living room, feeling as though the floor had vanished completely beneath my feet. It was my 20th birthday. I had worked hard all day, and I just wanted one single evening to feel valued in my own home. But once again, my existence was deemed an inconvenience. My happiness was viewed as a direct threat to Brittany's delicate, fragile ego. "I am not canceling my plans," I said, my voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "It is my birthday." Patricia stood up, her face flushed with righteous anger. She walked over to the entryway table where a few small wrapped gifts from my aunts and uncles were sitting waiting for me. She scooped them up in her arms and walked them over to the sofa, placing them directly into Brittany's lap. "You will surrender these gifts to your sister to help her feel better," Patricia commanded without a shred of empathy. "And if you cannot be a supportive, compassionate member of this family, then you do not need to live under this roof." I did not argue. I did not cry or beg them to love me. I simply walked upstairs to my pale blue bedroom, grabbed a single duffel bag, and packed whatever clothes would fit inside. I walked out into the freezing Chicago winter that very night. I had $50 in my pocket and nowhere to go, but I knew with absolute certainty that I would never return to a place where my worth was measured entirely by my sister's mood. The sharp, aggressive clinking of a silver fork against a crystal water glass snapped me violently back to the present moment in the upscale steakhouse. My father, Richard, was tapping his glass, demanding the immediate attention of the table. His face was a dark mottled red, and the thick veins in his neck were visibly straining against the crisp collar of his expensive dress shirt. "Your sister is absolutely right, Ruby," he barked, leaning his heavy, imposing frame across the table. "You are acting like a petulant child. You have carried this ridiculous stubbornness for over a decade, and it is frankly pathetic to watch. We invited you here tonight out of the goodness of our hearts to share in Brittany's joy, and this is how you repay us. I looked at my father, feeling a profound sense of pity for his willful, arrogant ignorance. You invited me here to pay your tab. Dad, I corrected him calmly, refusing to break eye contact. There is a very distinct difference between genuine inclusion and financial exploitation. Richard slammed his fist down on the table, causing the heavy silverware to rattle loudly against the china. Do not you dare speak to me with that condescending tone, he warned, his voice dripping with absolute contempt and authority. You owe your sister an apology immediately. She is preparing for the most important day of her life, and she is dealing with the immense stress of planning a high society wedding. You, on the other hand, have nothing but free time to dwell on your failures. He paused, looking me up and down with a sneer of pure disgust. Look at you, 33 years old and still bouncing around cheap apartments, scraping by on whatever pennies you make from that little property management gig of yours. You should be grateful we even allow you to sit at a table like this. You clean houses for a living, Ruby. Your sister is a luxury real estate broker, handling multi-million-dollar properties. She deals with elite clients who actually matter in the real world. You should be taking notes from her instead of causing problems and embarrassing us in public. The sheer comedic irony of his statement was almost too much to bear. He sat there in his tailored suit, looking down his nose at me, utterly convinced that I was a complete failure. He had absolutely no idea that my little property management gig was actually Pinnacle Estate Holdings. He had no clue that I personally employed over 200 people, or that my firm directly managed the massive real estate portfolios of some of the wealthiest families in the entire Midwest. He did not know that the understated designer dress I was wearing cost more than his monthly mortgage payment, or that I lived in a sprawling, high-security penthouse overlooking the magnificent city skyline. He blindly believed the pathetic narrative they had constructed about me because it was comfortable for them. It allowed them to maintain their fragile delusion that Brittany was the successful golden child and I was the tragic cautionary tale. I let him talk. I let him insult my career and completely demean my life choices because every single word he spoke only cemented my fierce resolve for what I knew was coming next. I will not be apologizing to anyone tonight, I said, keeping my voice perfectly steady, soft, and dangerously calm. And I certainly will not be taking any career advice from someone who relies on their estranged daughter to pay for their extravagant dinner. Brittany let out a dramatic gasp, clutching her chest, as if she had been physically struck by my words. She looked at our parents with wide, tear-filled eyes, playing the familiar role of the wounded victim to absolute perfection. This was her specialty. Whenever she felt threatened or challenged, she immediately weaponized her fake emotions to turn my parents against me. Mom, she cried out, her voice trembling with manufactured sorrow. I cannot believe she is doing this to me. Tonight was supposed to be about my engagement. It was supposed to be a beautiful celebration of my new life with Harrison, and she is completely ruining it, just like she ruins everything else she touches. Patricia immediately reached out and grabbed Brittany's hand, glaring at me with unbridled fury. It is okay, sweetheart, she cooed softly, stroking her arm. Do not let her toxic negative energy destroy your special moment. You have so much to be proud of. You have a brilliant, successful fiancé and a beautiful, wealthy future ahead of you. Brittany sniffled, wiping a fake tear from her perfectly contoured cheek. She took a deep, heavy breath and sat up straighter, a triumphant, vicious smile slowly replacing her wounded expression. She clearly realized that my refusal to pay the bill had given her the absolute perfect opening to shift the spotlight entirely back onto her own supposed greatness. She was ready to deliver her grand announcement, and she wanted to make sure it inflicted maximum damage on my self-esteem. She cleared her throat loudly, ensuring the entire restaurant could hear her next incredibly important words to us. Brittany stands up, tapping her knife against her crystal water glass. The sharp ringing sound cuts through the low ambient noise of the upscale steakhouse, silencing the quiet conversations around us. She basks in the sudden attention, raising her left hand high for everyone to witness. The dim romantic lighting catches the massive stone sitting on her ring finger. She twists her hand gracefully, making sure the facets reflect the warm glow of the chandeliers. My mother lets out a breathy gasp of adoration, covering her mouth with both hands while my father nods in solemn, proud approval. But sitting just a few feet away, I can see the absolute truth. In my line of work dealing with ultra-high net worth individuals, I have learned exactly how to spot genuine wealth. I know precisely what a flawless diamond looks like. The giant stone sitting heavily on her left ring finger throws off a harsh rainbow spectrum that gives the secret away instantly. It is cubic zirconia. It is a fake ring masking an empty reality. I sit silently taking all of this in while I watch her parade a cheap fake stone as a gem. Brittany looks down at me with a wide smile that resembles a predator playing with its cornered food. As you know, Harrison and I have been planning our future together. She begins, her voice projecting loudly enough to ensure the entire dining room is forced to listen. Harrison is currently finalizing a corporate merger, but he wanted me to share our incredible news tonight. He knows how hard I have worked and wanted to reward my dedication with something spectacular. My mother reaches across the white tablecloth and clasps her hands together, tears of overwhelming pride welling in her eyes. "Oh, sweetheart," Patricia says, her voice trembling. "We are so incredibly happy for you. You have always deserved a wonderful man who recognizes your immense value." Richard grunts his deep agreement, taking a celebratory sip of his red wine. He understands how to treat a woman of your high caliber. He is a real provider, not a lazy deadbeat who expects you to carry the financial load. Brittany preens under their endless validation. She takes a dramatic pause, letting the suspense build around the table before delivering her final calculated blow to my self-esteem. We are officially hosting our engagement party next weekend at our new $12 million lakeside estate in Lake Forest. Harrison purchased the entire property for me outright in cash as an early wedding gift, so we never have to worry about a mortgage. The table immediately erupts in joyous celebration. Patricia lets out a delighted, piercing scream, while Richard stands up to pull Brittany into a tight, proud embrace. "A $12 million estate in cash," Richard repeats, the heavy words rolling off his tongue like a sacred prayer. "That is absolutely magnificent, Brittany. We always knew you were destined for greatness, but this is beyond even our highest expectations. You have permanently secured the family legacy." They are so busy congratulating each other that they do not even bother to look in my direction. I sit perfectly still, my hands folded neatly in my lap, listening silently to the impossible numbers she is throwing around. Finally, Brittany pulls away from our father and his embrace. She reaches into her designer handbag and pulls out her smartphone. She taps the screen, confidently pulling up a photo gallery. She thrusts the screen aggressively into my face, forcing me to look directly at the image. "Take a very good look, Ruby," she sneers, her voice dropping to a harsh, mocking whisper meant only for my ears. "This is exactly what a real wealthy man provides for the woman he loves. This is what true success actually looks like. I know it might be extremely hard for you to comprehend, since you spend your miserable days scrubbing dirty toilets and unclogging gross drains for minimum wage, but try your hardest to wrap your mind around it. This is my brand new home." I look down at the illuminated screen of her phone. For a fraction of a second, my heart stops completely in my chest. My blood runs ice cold, rapidly freezing the breath deep in my lungs. The image displayed on the screen is a breathtaking professional wide-angle shot of a sprawling, ultra-modern mansion. I see the long, sweeping circular driveway paved with imported gray cobblestone. I see the towering white limestone facade glowing warmly against the evening sky. I see the massive custom wrought iron double doors and the panoramic floor-to-ceiling glass windows that offer an unobstructed, breathtaking view of Lake Michigan. It is 4200 Shoreline Drive. I do not just vaguely recognize this house from a magazine or a website. I know every single square inch of it intimately. I know the exact Italian marble used on the massive kitchen island. I know the precise layout of the heated floors in the sprawling master bathroom. I know these intricate details because I am the exact person who personally selected every single one of them. This $12 million estate does not belong to Harrison or my sister. It belongs to Pinnacle Estate Holdings. It is the absolute crown jewel of my company and luxury portfolio. The property is currently sitting completely vacant, fully staged with incredibly high-end rental furniture waiting patiently for a private exclusive showing with an international tech billionaire scheduled for the very end of the month. Nobody lives there. Nobody has officially purchased it, and absolutely no one named Harrison has ever handed over $12 million in cash for it. A fierce protective wave of anger flares deep in my stomach, but years of negotiating high stakes, corporate real estate deals have taught me exactly how to master my physical emotional reactions. I do not flinch or pull away. I do not gasp in shock. I maintain an absolute perfect mask of polite, bored indifference. I look at the beautiful photo again, my mind rapidly racing through the logical possibilities with cold, ruthless corporate efficiency. How on earth did my sister get inside my locked, secured property to take these intimate photos? The answer clicks into place almost immediately, making perfect sense. Brittany is a struggling, desperate real estate broker. She has basic access to the regional multi-listing service and the digital lockbox codes used by licensed agents to show vacant properties to potential legitimate buyers. She has not been given a $12 million house. She has simply stolen a security code to illegally trespass inside a valuable corporate asset just to fake a lavish lifestyle she can never actually afford. I slowly push her phone away from my face, offering her a calm, serene smile that clearly deeply unsettles her entire demeanor. It is a truly beautiful property, Brittany. I say, my voice perfectly level, steady, and utterly devoid of the bitter jealousy she wants to see. You must be incredibly proud of yourself for landing such a catch. Truly, I cannot wait to see the entire place in person next weekend. Brittany narrows her eyes sharply, searching my face for the bitter, desperate envy she so desperately craves, but finding only quiet, confident amusement staring back at her. She aggressively snatches her phone back, returning to her seat with a triumphant, arrogant toss of her blonde hair, completely and utterly unaware that she has just willingly handed me the exact devastating weapon I need to permanently dismantle her entire fraudulent existence. I know exactly what to do. I do not stay for dessert. I excuse myself from the table shortly after her grand display, citing an early morning work appointment that I simply cannot miss. My mother rolls her eyes and mutters something about my lack of family loyalty, while my father dismissively waves me away, barely pausing his eager conversation with Brittany about her supposed new wealth. I walk out of the restaurant, breathing in the crisp evening air of downtown Chicago. The valet brings my car around to the front curb. It is not a rusty old sedan. It is a sleek, custom black luxury sedan with tinted windows. I slide into the driver's seat and smoothly merge into the glowing city traffic, leaving their petty performance far behind me in the rearview mirror. I navigate the familiar streets, pulling into the private underground parking garage of my downtown building. I walk over to the private elevator reserved exclusively for the penthouse residents. I scan my fingerprint on the biometric reader and the polished steel doors slide open seamlessly. The elevator shoots up to the top floor of the high-rise, bypassing all the other levels. When the doors part, I step directly into the grand foyer of my home. It is a massive, sprawling penthouse with soaring ceilings and floor-to-ceiling windows that offer a completely unobstructed panoramic view of the entire Chicago skyline. The city lights glitter below me like a blanket of diamonds. I walk through the expansive living room, running my hand along the back of a bespoke velvet sofa. Every single piece of furniture, every piece of original artwork hanging on the walls, and every luxury fixture in this space was paid for with my own money. They thought I would fail without them. They firmly believed that cutting me off financially and emotionally would force me to come crawling back, apologizing for daring to demand basic respect. But their cruelty was actually the greatest gift they ever gave me. It fueled a relentless burning drive inside my chest that refused to be extinguished. I did not have a trust fund or a wealthy network to rely on, so I started at the absolute bottom. I began my journey by cleaning houses for wealthy families in the affluent suburbs. I spent my days scrubbing their marble floors, wiping down their custom kitchen counters, and paying very close attention to how they lived and operated. I saved every single dollar I earned. I lived in a tiny rundown apartment and ate cheap noodles while I slowly taught myself everything there was to know about the real estate market. Eventually, I transitioned from cleaning houses to managing them. I learned how to handle contractors, negotiate leases, and oversee major renovations. When the market dipped, I took a massive, terrifying risk, and used all my savings to buy a small foreclosed property. I fixed it up myself, flipped it for a profit, and immediately reinvested the money. I built my business brick by brick, deal by deal, until it evolved into Pinnacle Estate Holdings. Today, my firm does not just manage properties. We acquire, develop, and hold some of the most exclusive and coveted real estate in the entire Midwest. We cater specifically to ultra-high net worth individuals, corporate executives, and international investors who demand absolute perfection and absolute discretion. My parents and my sister have spent the last decade convincing themselves that I am a pathetic, struggling failure, because the alternative, acknowledging that I succeeded wildly without their help, would completely shatter their fragile worldview. I walk into my spacious home office and turn on the soft ambient lighting. I sit down in my ergonomic leather executive chair and wake up my secure corporate laptop. I am not angry anymore. The initial shock I felt at the restaurant has fully evaporated, leaving behind a highly focused tactical mindset. I need concrete, undeniable facts to understand exactly how Brittany is pulling off this ridiculous charade. I open the proprietary database for Pinnacle Estate Holdings. This system tracks every single asset in our luxury portfolio, including acquisition dates, staging details, security access logs, and current market status. I pull my keyboard closer and type in the address my sister so proudly shoved in my face earlier tonight. 4200 Shoreline Drive, Lake Forest. I hit the enter key and wait for the system to query the server. The estate was acquired by my holding company 8 months ago. We spent the last half year completing a meticulous high-end renovation, upgrading the smart home systems, installing imported finishes, and transforming the backyard into a resort-style oasis. The property is officially listed on the private luxury market for $12 million. The house is fully furnished with high-end pieces rented from an exclusive staging firm meant to showcase the potential of the space to prospective billionaire buyers. Absolutely no one is living there. No one has submitted an offer that has been accepted. The deed is held firmly by Pinnacle Estate Holdings, and I am the sole signatory for any potential transfer of ownership. Harrison has not purchased this property. He has not handed over millions of dollars in cash. My sister is blatantly lying to our parents, to her friends, and quite possibly to her own fiancé. I sit back in my chair, tapping my fingers rhythmically against the smooth surface of my desk. The sheer magnitude of her deception is almost hard to fully comprehend. But claiming ownership of a $12 million estate she does not own crosses the line from pathetic bragging into highly dangerous, potentially criminal territory. I look closer at the screen, pulling up the showing instructions for the property. Because it is a high-value asset, it is not listed on the public multi-listing service. It is an exclusive pocket listing. Only a select group of heavily vetted luxury real estate brokers have been granted the specific digital lockbox codes required to access the property for private client showings. Brittany works for a boutique brokerage firm that occasionally handles properties in that specific tier. She must have leveraged her position at her firm to request the secure access code under the guise of showing the estate to a wealthy prospective buyer. She is parading around my marble kitchen, taking photos by my infinity pool, and convincing everyone in her orbit that she is a newly minted multimillionaire. A slow, cold smile touches the corners of my mouth as the brilliant strategy begins to form in my mind. Brittany wants to play a high-stakes game of real estate monopoly with a property that actually belongs to me. She wants to host a lavish engagement party inside a house where she is nothing more than an unauthorized trespasser. I silently close the property file on my computer, but I do not log out of the system. I slowly reach for my sleek modern mobile phone sitting on the edge of the desk. I absolutely do not need to confront her directly or cause a massive public screaming match. I just need to let her keep digging her own grave deeper and deeper until the heavy walls finally collapse in on her. I unlock my phone and quickly pull up the direct contact information for the head of my entire corporate security division. It is time to implement the very first phase of my highly calculated response to this situation now. I press the glowing call button and hold the sleek device to my ear, listening to the steady ringing. It is late on a Saturday night, but at Pinnacle Estate Holdings we operate around the clock. The phone only rings twice before it is answered by Michael, the director of corporate security for my entire firm. He runs my security division with absolute military precision, protecting my assets, my clients, and my absolute peace of mind. "Good evening, Miss Ruby," he answers me, his voice crisp and immediately alert, despite the late hour of the night. "I assume this is not a social call." "You assume correctly." "Michael?" I reply, leaning back in my leather executive chair and staring out at the glittering Chicago skyline. "I need you to pull the complete digital access logs for the Lake Forest property on Shoreline Drive. Go back over the last 3 weeks and tell me exactly what you find." I can hear the rapid clicking of his keyboard through the speaker. He does not ask questions about why I am looking into this specific property. He simply follows instructions. "Give me just a moment," he says. "The system is querying the lockbox data now." I wait in the quiet solitude of my penthouse. The silence is comforting, a stark contrast to the loud, obnoxious bragging I endured at the steakhouse just an hour ago. "All right then," Michael says, his tone shifting slightly. "This is interesting. The property is a pocket listing, so access is heavily restricted, but we have an external broker code that has been swiped at the front door multiple times over the past 20 days. The entries are entirely outside of standard showing hours, mostly late evenings on weekends, and a few times extending well past midnight." My grip tightens slightly on the phone. Who does the access code belong to, Michael? More clicking on his end. The credentials belong to a luxury real estate broker named Brittany. She works for a boutique agency that we occasionally partner with locally. According to the smart home sensors in the house, the HVAC system and interior lighting have been manipulated during these unauthorized visits. There is also a significant amount of water usage reported. She is actively using the property, hosting personal gatherings from the looks of the utility spikes. A cold wave of vindication washes over me. Brittany is not just taking fake photos to post on social media. She is actively squatting in my $12 million corporate asset, treating it like her own personal playground. She is throwing dinner parties, inviting superficial friends over, and drinking wine on my imported Italian marble countertops to solidify her elaborate lie about being a wealthy homeowner. "This is a massive liability, Ruby." Michael continues, his voice hardening. "She is compromising a highly valuable asset. If any unauthorized guests damage the property, it could create a significant insurance nightmare. I can dispatch a private security team to the estate right now to lock down the premises. We can have the local police waiting there to arrest her for trespassing the next time she swipes her code." It is a very tempting offer. The thought of my arrogant sister being escorted out of my property in handcuffs is incredibly satisfying. It would be a swift and brutal end to her pathetic charade, but it would also be too easy. If I have her arrested tonight, then my parents will simply spin the narrative to make her the victim. They will claim it was all a big misunderstanding about broker access rules. They will never know the full extent of her deception or face the consequences of their own enabling behavior. "No, Michael," I say, keeping my voice perfectly calm and steady. "Do not call the local police, and do not lock her out of the system. I want you to leave her digital access code completely active." There is a brief, confused silence on the other end of the line. "You want to let her keep trespassing?" he asks, clearly surprised by my directive. "Ruby, the risk to the property is substantial. I am fully aware of the liability, Michael, but I need to handle this specific trespasser personally. She is planning to host a massive engagement party at the property next weekend. She is bringing dozens of people into the house to celebrate a fake lifestyle. I need her to feel absolutely secure and confident in her lie. I need her to believe that she has completely gotten away with it right up until the very last second. However, I will not leave the property unprotected while she plays her little games. I need you to deploy a specialized team to the Lake Forest estate tomorrow morning before sunrise. I want you to install discrete high-definition security cameras throughout the entire main level of the house. Cover the grand foyer, the formal dining room, the kitchen, and the living areas." Michael processes the instruction, immediately shifting back into tactical mode. "I can have a crew there by 5 in the morning. We will use the micro cameras hidden in the air vents and the crown molding. They are completely invisible to the naked eye, but they record everything in full high-definition audio and video directly to our secure cloud servers. It is entirely legally compliant, since the property is owned by your holding company and is classified as a vacant commercial asset. Exactly, I reply. I want every moment of her unauthorized presence recorded forever. I want irrefutable video evidence of her bringing rented furniture into my pristine home. I want crystal clear audio of her bragging about owning a house she has no legal right to occupy. I want a mountain of proof so massive that not even my parents will be able to talk their way out of it. Consider it done, Ruby. Michael says, his tone completely professional. We will have eyes and ears on the entire main level by tomorrow afternoon. If she so much as scuffs the hardwood floors or spills a drop of cheap wine on the marble, you will have it on tape. Is there anything else you need? Just one more thing, I say, a small genuine smile touching my lips. I need you to personally oversee the security detail for the property next weekend. We are going to have a very large crowd arriving for her engagement party, and I want to make sure the eventual eviction process is handled with absolute flawless execution. I will be there personally, Michael assures me. We will be ready whenever you give the word. I thank him and end the call. The trap has been set, and the bait is positioned. Brittany thinks she is outsmarting everyone, pulling off the ultimate con to secure her wealthy fiancé and impress our superficial parents. She has absolutely no idea that she has just walked willingly into a highly monitored surveillance zone owned by the sister she spent her entire life tormenting. I step away from the glowing monitors and walk out of my home office, heading toward my master bedroom. For 13 years, I carried the heavy toxic weight of their cruel rejection, constantly questioning my inherent worth. But tonight, that suffocating weight is gone. I am no longer the sad, lonely 20-year-old girl crying over a ruined birthday cake. I am a highly successful, independent woman who firmly holds all the winning cards. Sunlight streams through the windows of my penthouse, casting shadows across the floors. I wake up feeling more rested than I have in years. I pour a cup of dark coffee and stand watching the city wake up. There is a profound sense of peace settling over my life. I have set the gears in motion, and all I have to do now is wait for the inevitable collision. I do not have to wait very long. Exactly at 9 o'clock, my cell phone begins to ring. I glance down at the illuminated screen on the counter. It is my mother. I take a sip of coffee, letting it ring 3 times before I answer. I do not say hello, I simply let her speak first. Patricia barks, her voice sharp and filled with that familiar edge. I cannot believe you simply walked out of the restaurant last night without saying a word to anyone. You humiliated your father and completely ruined the end of your sister's celebration. We had to make up excuses. I am sorry if my early departure embarrassed you, Mom. I say, keeping my tone carefully measured and devoid of emotion. I told you I had a very early morning appointment for work today. Do not use your little cleaning jobs as an excuse to disrespect this family, Patricia snaps back. You have been incredibly selfish and your father is absolutely furious. However, we have decided to give you one final chance to make things right and prove that you care about your sister. I take another slow sip of my coffee. And how exactly do you expect me to do that, Mom? Brittany is hosting her engagement party next Saturday at her new estate. Patricia says, her voice dripping with pride. It is going to be a very elegant gathering. Harrison's family is flying in, and they expect sophistication. You are going to handle all the catering for the event. You are going to prepare the food, deliver it, and serve the guests completely free of charge as your personal engagement gift to make up for your terrible attitude last night. And let me be absolutely clear about this, Ruby. Patricia continues, her tone dropping into a cold, hard threat. If you refuse to do this, or if you try to cause any more problems, your father and I are completely done with you. We will cut you out of our will. You will not receive a single dime of the family money when we are gone. This is your last chance to show some loyalty. Do you understand me? A genuine smile spreads across my face as I listen to her ridiculous ultimatum. She is threatening to cut me out of a will that I do not need. She is trying to use financial leverage against a woman who makes more money in a single quarter than my father saved in his life. It is almost poetic in its absurdity, but I have to play the role of the dependent daughter a little bit longer. I understand, Mom, I say, making my voice sound subdued and compliant. I will handle the catering for the party. I will bring everything to the estate on Saturday and make sure the food is perfect. You do not have to worry about a thing. Good, Patricia says, a distinct note of smug satisfaction returning to her voice. See to it that you use the service entrance around back. We do not need you getting in the way of the guests arriving at the main doors. Wear something plain and black so you blend in. She hangs up without waiting for my response. I set the phone down on the counter. I let out a quiet laugh that echoes through my luxurious kitchen. They truly believe they hold all the power. They think they have cornered me into serving them in a house I personally own. I will gladly put on a plain black apron and serve them appetizers because it will give me the perfect front row seat to watch their fraudulent world burn. With the catering arrangement secured, I move back into my home office to prepare for the final piece of the puzzle. While Michael and his security team are currently wiring the Lake Forest estate with hidden high-definition cameras, I have another specialized team working diligently behind the scenes. When you manage assets for billionaires, you do not just need physical security, you need comprehensive financial intelligence. I sit down at my desk and open my secure email client. There is a new message waiting for me from Ethan, the head of my corporate investigative division. Last night, after I discovered Brittany's deception, I instructed David to run a deep background check on her supposedly wealthy fiancé, Harrison. If Harrison genuinely purchased a $12 million estate in cash, there would be an undeniable paper trail of his liquid assets. I needed to know exactly who this man was. I click the attached document and type in my private decryption password. The file opens, revealing a dense 50-page dossier on Harrison. I lean forward, my eyes scanning the executive summary. As I read the detailed financial breakdown, the pieces of the puzzle begin to shift and align. Harrison is not a multimillionaire. He is not a highly successful corporate executive waiting to finalize a massive, lucrative merger. He does not have $12 million in cash sitting in a bank account anywhere in the world. In fact, Harrison does not have much of anything at all. I scroll down to the financial disclosures documented by my team. Harrison's primary business venture collapsed entirely over a year ago, leaving unpaid vendors. He is carrying over $300,000 in hidden business debt. He has maxed out multiple credit cards just to maintain the appearance of a wealthy businessman. His car is leased and he is 3 months behind on payments. The designer suits he wears are on credit. I sit back in my chair, letting the brilliance of the situation wash over me. The cubic zirconia Brittany flashed at the steakhouse was the absolute best that a bankrupt, desperate fraud could manage to put on a credit card. Harrison is pursuing my sister because she has spent the last year convincing him she is a highly successful luxury real estate mogul. She has paraded him through various multi-million-dollar properties using her broker access codes, claiming she owns them. They are actively conning each other. Brittany thinks she trapped a wealthy, sophisticated provider who is going to elevate her social status and fund her lavish dreams forever. Harrison firmly believes he has seduced an independent, wealthy real estate heiress who can easily pay off his mountain of secret debt and save him from complete financial ruin. They are two broke, desperate grifters frantically clinging to each other. The engagement party next weekend is not just a celebration of their relationship. It is a collision course of two massive, elaborate lies. Harrison's family is flying in fully expecting to be hosted by a wealthy bride at her $12 million estate. My parents are arriving expecting to be hosted by a wealthy groom who bought the estate in cash. They are all walking blindly into a beautiful house of cards resting entirely on a property I personally control. I slowly close the heavy dossier on my desk and smile to myself. The morning of the engagement party arrives with a clear sky over the city. I wake up early feeling profound anticipation humming in my veins. I walk into my expansive closet and deliberately bypass the rows of custom-tailored designer dresses. Instead, I pull out a plain black cotton shirt and basic black slacks exactly as my mother instructed me to do. I tie my hair back tightly in an unpretentious knot. I look at my reflection in the full-length mirror. I am perfectly dressed for the precise role of the invisible, struggling sister. I leave my penthouse and drive to the Lake Forest estate, arriving hours before any guests are scheduled to appear. My executive chef from one of the exclusive culinary firms I frequently contract is already waiting for me at the service gate. His name is Marco. I explained the basic parameters of the situation to him yesterday, and he was more than happy to play along with the charade. He brought his best staff and a menu of exquisite high-end appetizers that will easily outshine anything my sister could afford. We pull into the driveway and park near the detached garage, keeping our vehicles out of sight from the main road. The estate looks breathtaking in the morning light, its white limestone facade gleaming beautifully against the manicured green lawns. I unlock the service entrance using my administrative override code and let David and his team inside the professional-grade kitchen. They get to work unpacking crates of fresh imported ingredients and setting up their prep stations on the marble counters. I stand near the edge of the kitchen watching them work with quiet efficiency. About an hour later, the loud, rumbling sound of a commercial box truck echoes heavily up the driveway. I step into the grand foyer, just as the custom wrought iron front doors are pushed open by the delivery crew. Two exhausted delivermen carry an aggressively tacky gold-painted mirror into my pristine entryway. They are followed closely by another crew hauling in cheap white faux leather sofas and gaudy mirrored side tables that look like they belong in a discount club. Brittany has rented the most ostentatious, heavily discounted party furniture she could find to stage the house for her guests. I stand in the shadows of the hallway, crossing my arms over my plain black shirt as I watch this agonizing parade of terrible taste invade my meticulously designed property. The delivery men are rushing careless and completely oblivious to the value of their surroundings. I watch in silent, calculated horror as the metal leg of a cheap rented cocktail table drags harshly across my imported Brazilian hardwood floors, leaving a deep, visible scratch in the expensive finish. One of the men bumps a heavy catering cart against the freshly painted hallway wall, leaving a dark, noticeable scuff mark near the baseboards. The damage is superficial and can be repaired by my maintenance crews on Monday morning, but from a strict legal standpoint, it is absolute gold. I slide my phone out of my pocket and discreetly take high-definition photographs of every single scratch, every scuff, and every careless mistake. I am actively compiling a comprehensive itemized invoice for property damage that will be legally billed directly to Brittany, along with her eventual eviction notice. Every damaged floorboard adds another concrete layer of liability to the fraud charges my corporate legal team is preparing. I capture the license plate of the delivery truck and log the exact time of the damage. Just as the delivery crews finish their chaotic setup, a sleek black town car pulls up to the front doors. Brittany steps out looking like she is auditioning for a reality television show. She is wearing a tight white designer dress that I immediately recognize as being from last season, and her fake cubic zirconia ring is polished to a blinding shine. She struts into the grand foyer clutching a clipboard and looking around with an arrogant, proprietary air. She spots me standing near the kitchen entrance and her face instantly twists into a deep scowl of distaste. She marches over to me, her high heels clicking aggressively against my hardwood floors. "Ruby, what on earth are you doing standing out here in the main hallway?" She snaps, her voice echoing loudly in the spacious room. "I specifically told Mom to make sure you stayed completely out of sight. The guests are going to be arriving in less than 2 hours, and I do not want you lingering around the front doors making the place look cheap." I keep my expression completely blank, schooling my features into a mask of quiet submission. "I was just checking on the delivery teams," I say, my voice soft and deliberately meek. "They scratched the floor in the hallway when they brought in the sofas. I know how much this beautiful house means to you and your future husband." Brittany lets out an exasperated, dramatic sigh, waving her hand dismissively in the air. "Oh, please do not be so dramatic," she scoffs, rolling her eyes heavily. "It is just a tiny scratch. Harrison will have his maintenance people fix it tomorrow. When you own a $12 million house, you do not stress over little things like that. But I guess a struggling house cleaner like you would not understand how real money actually works. You panic over a broken vacuum." She looks me up and down, taking in my plain black shirt and slacks with a sneer of absolute superiority. "At least you actually listened and wore something appropriate for the help," she mutters, crossing her arms. "Now listen carefully. When Harrison and his family arrive, You are to remain entirely in the kitchen until it is time to serve the appetizers. You will carry the trays quietly. You will not speak to any of my guests unless they speak to you first, and you will absolutely not mention your pathetic little life to anyone. If anyone asks, you are just a temporary server hired for the evening. Do you understand me? I nod slowly, maintaining eye contact, just long enough to let her see my compliance. I understand completely. Brittany, I say. I am just here to serve the food. I will stay completely out of your way and make sure everything is perfect for your special day. Good, she snaps, turning on her heel to inspect a gaudy floral arrangement sitting on the kitchen island, and use the service entrance from now on. I do not want you tracking dirt through my front doors. I want this estate looking flawless before Harrison arrives. I turn around and walk back into the kitchen, the sound of her arrogant instructions fading behind me. I step into the bustling workspace where Marco is expertly arranging delicate caviar appetizers onto silver platters. He looks at me, raising a questioning eyebrow, having heard the entire exchange from the other room. I just smile at him and pick up a polishing cloth to wipe down a silver tray. My sister thinks she has firmly established her dominance, placing me perfectly into the subjugated role she believes I deserve. She has absolutely no idea that she is merely a temporary guest in my kingdom, and her reign is about to end. The cameras hidden above us capture every single word she speaks, preserving her arrogance for the devastating finale that is rapidly approaching. The heavy oak service door swings shut behind me, cutting off the sound of Brittany barking frantic orders at the delivery men. I grab a silver polishing cloth and position myself near the massive kitchen island, blending perfectly into the background. About 30 minutes pass in a tense, highly productive rhythm before the unmistakable crunch of luxury tires on the gravel driveway signals the arrival of my parents. I hear the heavy front doors open, followed immediately by my mother, letting out a loud theatrical gasp that carries all the way down the grand hallway. I step quietly toward the edge of the kitchen, just enough to see their entrance without drawing attention to myself. Patricia and Richard are standing in the grand foyer, looking around with wide, unblinking eyes. They are taking in the soaring 20-foot ceilings, the imported crystal chandelier I personally commissioned from a designer in Milan, and the sweeping dual staircases. My father actually takes off his expensive suit jacket, clutching it in his hands as he turns in a slow circle, completely awestruck by the sheer magnitude of the wealth surrounding him. Oh my goodness, Richard. Patricia breathes, her voice trembling with absolute reverence. I knew Harrison was successful, but this is simply magnificent. This is a true legacy property. Brittany emerges from the formal dining room, smiling like a queen, welcoming her loyal subjects. She throws her arms open wide and pulls our parents into a massive group hug. Welcome to my new home, she sings out, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. Harrison told me to just pick out whatever I wanted, and he handled all the boring paperwork. Do you love it? Patricia pulls back and grabs Brittany by the shoulders, looking at her as if she has just delivered the moon and the stars. Love it is not a strong enough word, sweetheart. Patricia gushes. You have outdone yourself. The architecture, the natural light, it is all so perfectly you. I have to bite the inside of my cheek to keep from laughing out loud at the irony. The architecture is perfectly me. I spent 6 months meticulously redesigning that floor plan, moving walls, and fighting with city planners to maximize the natural light pouring through those specific windows. Brittany did not even know this zip code existed until she stole my access code. Richard steps forward and kisses Brittany on the cheek, his chest puffed out with overwhelming pride. You played your cards perfectly, young lady, he says, his voice booming through the foyer. You found yourself a real man who knows how to provide. This is exactly the kind of life your mother and I always envisioned for you. You are setting the standard for this entire family. Brittany beams, soaking up their endless validation like a sponge. Well, I just wanted to make sure we had a proper space to entertain our high society friends, she says, waving her hand toward the living room. Come, let me show you the kitchen. It has these gorgeous marble countertops that I practically had to beg Harrison to import for me. I quickly step back away from the entryway and resume vigorously polishing a silver serving tray. A moment later, the three of them stroll into the kitchen. My mother runs her hands reverently over the cool, smooth surface of the kitchen island. The very same island my company paid $50,000 to have installed just 2 short months ago. She sighs happily before her eyes finally land on me, standing silently in the corner wearing my plain black uniform. The warm, joyful expression on Patricia's face instantly drops, replaced by a tight look of profound disappointment. "Oh, you are actually here," she says, her tone flattening out completely. "I assumed you would be running late as usual." I keep my head slightly bowed, maintaining my role as the subservient help. "I have been here all morning, Mom," I reply softly. "The appetizers are almost ready to be served." Patricia lets out a short, dismissive scoff and turns back to Brittany. "Well, at least she is making herself useful for once," Patricia says loudly, making absolutely certain I can hear every single word. "You know, Ruby, you really should take some notes today while you are wiping down these beautiful counters. This is what happens when you apply yourself and make smart life choices instead of settling for mediocrity. If you had just listened to us years ago, you might not be stuck wearing an apron at your older sister's multi-million-dollar estate. You could have had a fraction of this kind of success if you were not so incredibly stubborn and rebellious." I do not respond to her cruel bait. I simply nod and pick up another silver tray, turning my back to them to hide the cold, calculated smile creeping onto my face. I am taking mental notes, recording every single insult to memory. Brittany and Patricia eventually wander off toward the backyard to inspect the infinity pool, leaving my father alone in the kitchen with me. The moment the heavy glass patio doors slide shut behind them, the atmosphere in the room shifts drastically. Richard's posture changes instantly from a proud, beaming father to an aggressive, intimidating enforcer. He closes the distance between us, stepping so close to me that I can smell the strong peppermint mouthwash on his breath and the expensive cologne he saved specifically for special occasions. He leans down, invading my personal space, and points a thick, heavy finger directly at my face. "You listen to me very carefully." He growls, his voice dropping into a harsh, menacing whisper that echoes off the pristine marble surfaces. "Harrison's family is arriving very soon. They are old money elite society people. They are not the kind of people who tolerate sloppy service or embarrassing family drama. They expect absolute perfection, and I will not allow you to ruin this monumental day for your sister." I take a slow, measured breath, looking up into his furious eyes. "I am just here to serve the food, Dad," I say, quietly keeping my hands folded neatly in front of my apron. "I will not cause any problems. I will stay completely out of sight, just like Mom wanted." Richard steps even closer, trapping me physically against the edge of the marble counter. "You had better not cause any problems," he hisses, his eyes narrowing into dark, angry slits. "If you embarrass Brittany tonight, if you drop a single tray, if you spill a single drink, or if you open your mouth and say anything stupid to Harrison's wealthy relatives, you will be completely dead to me. Do you understand?" He pauses, letting the heavy threat hang in the tense air between us. "I will personally make sure you never step foot in our house again, and I will ensure your mother cuts you off completely. You are hanging by a very thin thread in this family, Ruby. You have been a massive disappointment for 13 long years. Do not snap that thread today by acting like the jealous, bitter failure we all know you are. Serve the food, keep your mouth shut, and remember your place." I stare back at him, matching his intense glare with a gaze of absolute icy calm. It takes every ounce of my formidable willpower not to laugh right in his face. He is threatening to banish me from a family I walked away from over a decade ago. He is threatening to cut me off financially when I am literally standing inside a spectacular fortress of wealth that I built entirely with my own bare hands. He thinks he holds all the ultimate power in this dynamic, completely blind to the reality that he is nothing more than a pathetic trespasser standing on my imported floors. "I understand you perfectly, Dad," I say, my voice ringing with absolute crystal clarity. "I promise you that I will not forget my place tonight. I will make sure everyone in this house gets exactly what they deserve. You will not have to worry about my performance." Richard stares at me for a long, heavy second, trying to find any trace of rebellion or insolence in my eyes. Finding only quiet compliance, he finally steps back, adjusting his expensive silk tie with a sharp, jerky motion. He gives me one last warning glare before turning on his heel and marching out toward the backyard to join his beloved golden child. I watch him walk away completely oblivious to the hidden cameras recording his every move. The stage is perfectly set for their absolute destruction. I take a deep breath, letting the heavy oak service door swing shut behind Richard. The kitchen is a sanctuary of controlled chaos. David hands me a polished silver tray loaded with delicate caviar blinis and artisanal tartlets. I adjust my plain black apron, making sure it sits perfectly straight against my dark shirt. The heavy brass doorbell echoes loudly through the sprawling estate, signaling the arrival of the guests of honor. I wait a few moments to let them enter before slipping through the secondary dining room doors, blending seamlessly into the background shadows. The grand foyer is suddenly filled with loud, booming voices. Harrison has finally arrived, and he has brought his parents with him. I position myself near the wide archway leading into the main living room, holding my silver tray perfectly still. Harrison looks exactly like the background dossier described. He is wearing a designer suit that fits just a fraction too tightly across the shoulders, a clear sign it was bought off the rack on credit rather than custom tailored. He looks exhausted, his eyes darting nervously around the massive foyer, taking in the soaring ceilings and the imported crystal chandelier. He is trying desperately to project the image of a wealthy tech entrepreneur, but the subtle tension in his jaw betrays his absolute panic. He firmly believes my sister bought this $12 million house. His mother steps into the house right behind him. She is a tall, imposing woman wearing a heavy fur coat that smells faintly of mothballs. Her name is Sylvia, and she immediately begins scrutinizing every single detail of the architecture with a highly critical eye. She does not look impressed by the grand scale of the property. She looks incredibly hungry. Her husband stands silently behind her, looking completely disengaged from the entire spectacle, as if he is merely a prop in his wife's aggressive social maneuvering. Brittany rushes forward, her high heels clicking loudly against my imported hardwood floors. She throws her arms around Harrison, planting a dramatic kiss on his cheek. "Welcome to our new home, baby," she coos loudly, ensuring my parents can hear her from the living room. "I just know you are going to absolutely love how I arranged the furniture for the party." Harrison swallows hard, looking at the cheap rented sofas sitting awkwardly on my pristine floors. "It looks incredibly expensive, Brittany," he manages to say, his voice remarkably tight. Sylvia keeps her heavy fur coat wrapped around her shoulders and thrusts her handbag toward my father, who awkwardly takes it since Brittany did not bother to hire an actual attendant. "The house is certainly large," Sylvia remarks, running a highly critical finger along the edge of my custom mahogany entryway table. "It takes a very specific kind of generational wealth to maintain a property of this magnitude. I do hope your family understands the immense financial burden of such an estate, Richard." My father puffs out his chest, immediately taking the bait. "Oh, we understand perfectly, Sylvia," he says, his voice booming with fake, unwavering confidence. "Our family has always believed in making significant real estate investments. We are incredibly proud of Brittany and the high standard of living she has achieved." I step forward, then lowering my head and offering the silver tray of appetizers to the group. Sylvia looks right through me as if I am a piece of furniture. She takes a caviar blini without a single word of thanks. Harrison takes one too, his hands shaking very slightly. I pivot smoothly, offering the tray to my sister. Brittany glares at me, her eyes flashing with a silent, violent threat, before she delicately picks up a tartlet. I move away, circulating through the growing crowd of guests arriving behind them. The living room quickly fills with loud chatter, clinking glasses, and the overwhelming scent of expensive perfumes. I keep my movements slow and deliberate, hovering near the edges of the room where the acoustics allow me to hear almost everything. About an hour into the engagement party, I notice Sylvia cornering my mother near the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the infinity pool. Patricia is holding a glass of white wine, her knuckles white from gripping the delicate stem too tightly. Richard is standing right beside her, looking uncharacteristically tense. I quietly approach a nearby side table, pretending to meticulously arrange a stack of white cocktail napkins. "It is such a beautiful view," Sylvia says, gesturing vaguely toward the dark, choppy waters of Lake Michigan. "Harrison tells me your family has extensive real estate holdings in the city." Patricia laughs, a high, nervous sound that grates harshly against my ears. We do quite well for ourselves, she replies, forcing a bright plastic smile. Richard has worked very hard to provide a wonderful, lavish life for our girls. Sylvia takes a slow, deliberate sip of her drink. Her eyes lock onto my mother with the lethal precision of a heat-seeking missile. That is exactly what I wanted to discuss with you, Patricia. She says, her voice dropping to a low, conspiratorial tone that carries perfectly to where I am standing. Harrison is a brilliant businessman, of course. His ventures are incredibly innovative. But as you know, the tech industry can be quite volatile these days. Richard shifts his weight uncomfortably, loosening his tie. Every industry has its ups and downs, Sylvia. Yes, but Harrison is currently undergoing a minor business restructuring. Sylvia continues, her tone perfectly polite but layered with heavy, undeniable pressure. It is nothing serious, of course. Just a small matter of temporary liquidity. He has some outstanding business debts that need to be cleared before the wedding. It is just $300,000. A mere drop in the bucket for a family that can casually purchase a $12 million lakeside estate in cash. I stop arranging the cocktail napkins. I stand perfectly still, holding my breath. Sylvia is directly asking my parents to pay off Harrison's secret mountain of debt. She assumes that because Brittany is bragging about buying this house in cash, my parents must be sitting on a massive fortune. Patricia's face drains of all color. The bright artificial smile completely vanishes from her lips. $300,000, she repeats, her voice barely a rough whisper. Sylvia nods smoothly, leaning in closer. We firmly believe that when two prominent families merge, their financial assets should merge as well. It would be a gesture of good faith from your side. Since Brittany is already bringing this magnificent property into the marriage, it only makes sense that your family clears Harrison's minor obligations to start their union on a clean slate. I am sure Richard can simply write a check tomorrow morning to resolve the issue entirely. Exactly 1 year after Brittany's fraudulent engagement party collapsed, I returned to the Lake Forest estate under completely different circumstances. 6 months earlier, Pinnacle withdrew the property from the market, and I purchased it from the holding company through a fully documented independent transaction. Tonight, the circular driveway is lined with luxury vehicles belonging to invited guests rather than trespassers. Genuine laughter fills the living room, while a live jazz band plays beneath the crystal chandeliers. The hardwood floors have been restored, the rented furniture is gone, and every person inside was welcomed by me. This is no longer the stage for Brittany's manufactured success. It is my home, and tonight it is hosting my 34th birthday. But his fragile, massive ego will never allow him to admit that to a woman he perceives as old money elite. He cannot stand the thought of looking poor in front of Harrison's wealthy family. He cannot bear to shatter the elaborate facade that Brittany has dragged them all into. Richard clears his throat, pulling at the collar of his dress shirt. He looks physically ill, but he forces a tight, strained smile onto his face. Well, Sylvia, he stammers, his voice lacking its usual booming authority. Business restructuring is certainly common. We can absolutely sit down and discuss the financial arrangements for the wedding very soon. We always take care of our own. Patricia looks at her husband with absolute sheer panic in her eyes. She knows they cannot afford to pay off Harrison's debts. She knows they are trapped in a corner. But she also knows that if they refuse, Sylvia will realize they are not the ultra-wealthy elite family Brittany has claimed they are. The entire engagement could fall apart, and they would lose their precious connection to Harrison's supposed high society world. Sylvia smiles, a cold, triumphant expression settling on her features. I am so glad we understand each other, Richard, she says, patting his arm condescendingly. Harrison will be so relieved to know his new family is stepping up to the plate. I will have his accountant send over the exact figures on Monday morning. She turns and walks away, leaving my parents standing alone by the window. Patricia immediately turns to Richard, grabbing his arm frantically. Richard, what are we going to do? She hisses, her voice shaking with absolute terror. We do not have that kind of cash lying around. If we take out a second loan on our house, the bank will flag it. Keep your voice down, Richard snaps, looking around nervously. We will figure it out, Patricia. We have to figure it out. If we do not pay this debt, his mother will ruin Brittany's reputation in their social circles. We cannot let our daughter lose a man like Harrison over a temporary cash flow problem. We will pull from your retirement accounts if we have to. I pick up my silver tray and slowly walk back toward the kitchen, my heart pounding with profound, grim satisfaction. They are actively plotting to drain their own retirement savings to pay off a bankrupt con artist, all to protect a fake lifestyle built inside my stolen house. The layers of deception are folding in on each other, creating a heavy, suffocating trap that they have willingly walked right into. They are so blinded by greed and their desperate need for status that they cannot see the massive cliff they are currently sprinting toward. I walk through the heavy oak doors, placing the empty tray on the marble island. I take a deep breath, relishing the absolute perfection of this moment. The party is just beginning, and the main event is still waiting patiently in the wings. I pick up the heavy silver tray of champagne flutes from the counter and smooth my black apron one last time. Marco gives me a quick nod of encouragement before turning back to his prep station. I push through the swinging oak door and step out into the sprawling main living area of the estate. The party is now in full swing, and the noise level has risen to a steady, dull roar of overlapping conversations and clinking glasses. The room is packed with people dressed in expensive evening wear, trying incredibly hard to impress one another. Harrison has invited dozens of his supposed high society friends and business associates. They mingle awkwardly with my parents and their suburban country club acquaintances. The stark contrast between the magnificent architecture of my home and the cheap rented furniture Brittany brought in is even more glaring now that the space is filled with people. I navigate smoothly through the crowd, balancing the silver tray with practiced ease. No one pays any attention to the woman in the plain black uniform serving their drinks. I am completely invisible to them, which is exactly how I need to be. I move from small group to small group, offering delicate crystal flutes of champagne and listening closely to the conversations swirling around me. The level of deception hanging in the air is absolutely suffocating. I hear Harrison telling a group of older men about his latest venture capital acquisitions, completely fabricating numbers that I know for a fact do not exist. I see my father standing near the fireplace, laughing loudly at a joke, making sure everyone knows he is the proud patriarch of this incredibly successful family. He looks perfectly at ease, completely hiding the sheer panic I know is currently consuming him over the $300,000 debt Sylvia just dropped in his lap. I weave my way toward the center of the room, where the largest crowd has gathered. Brittany is standing near the massive floor-to-ceiling windows, holding court like a reigning monarch. She has a glass of champagne in one hand and is gesturing wildly with the other, making sure her fake diamond ring catches the light from the chandeliers above. She is surrounded by Harrison and his parents, along with a few women I recognize as her rival real estate colleagues. They are all staring at her with varying degrees of envy and awe. I step quietly up behind the group, offering my tray to a man standing on the edge of the circle. I keep my head bowed, but I listen intently to every single word my sister is saying. Brittany takes a delicate sip of her drink and sighs happily. Yes, we looked at dozens of properties before deciding to just build exactly what we wanted. She lies, her voice carrying effortlessly over the ambient noise of the party. Harrison was completely focused on the location, of course, but I took full control over the actual design process. I wanted the architecture to feel modern but still warm and inviting. Sylvia raises an eyebrow, looking around the spectacular room. You designed this entire estate yourself, Brittany. I must say it is quite an ambitious undertaking for someone without a formal background in architecture. Oh, I worked very closely with the contractors, Brittany replies smoothly, not missing a single beat in her elaborate performance. Take these floors, for example. I personally flew to Brazil to select this specific hardwood. I demanded that the grain pattern match the natural flow of the natural light coming through the windows. And the floating staircase in the foyer was entirely my concept. The builders told me it was structurally impossible, but I simply refused to take no for an answer. I made them tear it down and rebuild it twice until they got it exactly right. I stand perfectly still behind her, gripping the edges of my silver tray so tightly that my knuckles turn white. It takes an absolutely monumental amount of self-control to keep my face entirely blank. I am the one who spent 3 agonizing weeks negotiating with the Brazilian lumber suppliers to secure that specific hardwood. I am the one who sat in a dusty construction trailer for 6 hours, fighting with the structural engineers to make that floating staircase a reality. I poured my heart, my soul, and my own capital into every single square inch of this magnificent property. Hearing her stand in the middle of my living room and casually claim credit for my grueling hard work is infuriating, but it is also the most potent fuel for the fire I am about to unleash. Her real estate colleagues murmur their polite, impressed praises, clearly intimidated by her supposed massive wealth and influence. Harrison wraps his arm around her waist, looking at her with a mixture of pride and desperate relief. He believes her lies completely. He looks at this $12 million house and sees his ultimate salvation from bankruptcy. Brittany turns slightly to address another guest, and her eyes suddenly lock onto me, standing silently just a few feet away. For a brief second, a flash of genuine annoyance crosses her carefully contoured face. She hates seeing me here, even in the subservient role she forced me into, because my mere presence reminds her of the messy, complicated reality she is trying so desperately to escape. But then her expression changes. The annoyance melts away and is replaced by a wicked, calculating gleam. She realizes that I am not just a nuisance. I am the absolute perfect prop for her grand performance. She waves her hand aggressively in my direction, signaling me to step forward. "Oh, Ruby, come here for a second," she calls out, her voice dripping with thick, condescending sweetness. I step into the center of the wealthy circle, keeping my eyes lowered and offering the tray of champagne. My heart is beating a steady, calm rhythm against my ribs. I know exactly what she is doing, and I am more than happy to let her dig this hole as deep as she possibly can. "Everyone," Brittany says, gesturing to me with her champagne flute. "I would love for you to meet my older sister, Ruby." The guests turn their attention to me, their eyes scanning my plain black uniform and my slicked back hair. Sylvia looks at me with a mixture of confusion and profound distaste, clearly wondering why the sister of the wealthy bride is dressed exactly like the hired catering staff. Brittany lets out a soft, patronizing sigh, placing a hand over her heart in a dramatic display of fake sibling concern. Ruby has had a very difficult time finding her footing in the world, she explains to the silent, captivated audience. She has always struggled to maintain a stable career. She just runs a tiny little house cleaning service downtown. It is hard, honest work, but obviously it does not pay very well. When I realized she was struggling to make rent again this month, I simply had to step in and help her out. She reaches out and pats my arm gently, a gesture so entirely fake it almost makes me recoil. "So I decided to hire her to serve the appetizers tonight," Brittany continues, beaming at the crowd. "I always believe that when you are blessed with immense success and massive wealth, it is your absolute duty to lift up the less fortunate members of your own family. Family is everything, after all." A collective murmur of sympathetic approval ripples through the group of guests. Several of the women offer me looks of deep, devastating pity. Harrison smiles proudly at Brittany, clearly enamored by her supposed incredible generosity and grace. My mother, Patricia, who is standing just a few feet away, having joined the circle, nods her head in solemn agreement, completely supporting this horrific, humiliating narrative. I do not say a single word in my own defense. I do not break my character. I look up at Brittany, offering her a small, meek smile of profound gratitude. "Thank you so much for the opportunity, Brittany," I say, my voice perfectly soft and compliant. "I really appreciate you letting me work in your beautiful new home tonight." Brittany absolutely glows, soaking up my public submission like sunshine on a cold day. "It is my pleasure, Ruby," she says, turning back to her wealthy audience. "Now why do not you go back to the kitchen and see if the chef needs help washing the appetizer plates? We need to make sure the service remains flawless for the rest of the evening." I bow my head slightly and turn away from the group, carrying my silver tray back through the crowded room. I can feel their condescending stares burning into my back as I walk away. They are all whispering about the sad, pathetic sister who has to serve food at her older sibling's engagement party just to keep a roof over her head. They are marveling at Brittany and her endless wealth and her big, beautiful, charitable heart. I push through the heavy oak doors and step back into the quiet safety of the kitchen. I set the tray down on the marble counter and take a long, deep breath. The tension inside the main living room is currently building to an absolute boiling point. The lies are stacked so incredibly high that the entire structure is completely unstable. Brittany has publicly claimed my house, my design work, and my money. She has humiliated me in front of 50 strangers to elevate her own fragile ego. She has set the stage with absolutely flawless precision. I look up at the small dark circle of the hidden security camera mounted perfectly inside the crown molding above the refrigerator. The red recording light is completely invisible, but I know it is there capturing every single frame of this magnificent disaster. I straighten my black apron and reach for another tray of delicate, expensive hors d'oeuvres. The party is in full swing and the trap is completely primed. I am entirely ready for the final confrontation that is rapidly approaching now. I step away from the kitchen counter and pick up a fresh silver tray loaded with delicate crystal glasses of sparkling water and expensive red wine. The heavy oak door swings open with a soft sigh as I re-enter the sprawling living room. The party has reached that distinct pitch where the alcohol has loosened tongues and the laughter rings just a fraction too loud. The 50 or so guests are scattered across the imported rugs, completely oblivious to the fact that they are standing inside a meticulously wired surveillance zone. I glide through the crowd, keeping my posture perfectly neutral. My plain black uniform acts as the ultimate camouflage, making me effectively invisible to people who only measure worth by designer labels and bank account balances. I scan the room, locating my primary targets. Sylvia is standing near the grand piano holding a large glass of deep red wine. She is flanked by her son Harrison and my sister Brittany. They are engaged in an animated conversation with two wealthy-looking couples. My parents are hovering just a few feet away, beaming with transparent pride as they watch Brittany effortlessly play the role of the affluent hostess. I adjust my grip on the silver tray and begin walking slowly in their direction, letting the ambient noise of the party wash over me. The trap has been set, but it needs a catalyst to finally snap shut. I am about to provide one. As I approach the group, I can hear Sylvia speaking in her loud, aristocratic drawl. She is complaining about the terrible service she received at a charity gala last week, making sure everyone around her knows exactly how high her standards are. Brittany nods along enthusiastically, desperate to mirror her future mother-in-law and secure her approval. Harrison stands beside them, looking slightly flushed, likely calculating how many more lies he has to tell before the night is over. I step into the periphery of their circle, waiting for a natural lull in the conversation before offering my tray. Sylvia glances in my direction, and her eyes narrow with immediate harsh judgment. She remembers exactly who I am from Brittany's humiliating introduction earlier. I am not just a nameless server anymore. I am the pathetic, struggling sister who represents a massive, ugly stain on the perfect, wealthy image my family is desperately trying to project. Sylvia looks at my plain black uniform and then back up to my face, a cruel, mocking light sparking in her eyes. It is clear that she sees an opportunity to assert her dominance and put me firmly in my place, proving her superiority to the rest of the circle. I hold the tray perfectly still, offering the selection of beverages with a blank, compliant expression. Would anyone care for a refreshment? I ask, my voice carefully modulated to sound entirely subservient. Sylvia steps forward, her heavy fur coat brushing against my arm. She looks down at the tray and lets out a long, theatrical sigh of disappointment. It is incredibly difficult to find competent help these days, she announces loudly, ensuring the surrounding guests can hear her disdain. One would think that since you are family, you would at least attempt to perform your duties with a basic level of grace. She reaches out with her right hand, pretending to reach for a glass of sparkling water on the far side of my tray. In her left hand, she is holding a nearly full glass of expensive dark red wine. As she leans forward, she deliberately tilts her left wrist. It is not an accident. It is not a clumsy stumble. It is a precise, calculated motion. The deep red liquid pours over the rim of her crystal glass, splashing heavily directly onto the front of my plain black shirt. The wine soaks instantly into the cotton fabric, spreading in a dark, ugly stain across my chest and dripping down onto my black slacks. A few drops hit the polished Brazilian hardwood floor near my shoes. A collective gasp ripples through the circle of guests. The surrounding conversations abruptly halt as people turn their heads to witness the spectacle. I stand completely frozen, the cold, wet sensation of the wine sinking into my skin. I do not drop the silver tray. I do not flinch or cry out. I maintain absolute perfect stillness, absorbing the profound shock of her physical aggression. "Oh, look what you have done, you clumsy girl!" Sylvia snaps instantly, flipping the narrative to make herself the victim of the situation. "You completely bumped into my arm. You are incredibly incompetent." She takes a dramatic step back, rushing at her own pristine clothing, even though not a single drop touched her. This is exactly what happens when you rely on charity cases instead of hiring actual trained professionals. She points a manicured finger at the few drops of wine glistening on the hardwood floor. "Clean that up immediately before it stains the wood," she demands, her voice echoing sharply through the suddenly quiet living room. "And then go to the kitchen and do something about yourself. You are an absolute disgrace to your sister and her beautiful home." The silence in the room is deafening. 50 wealthy guests are staring directly at me, watching to see how the struggling, pathetic sister will handle this brutal public humiliation. My parents are standing frozen in horror, terrified that this scene will ruin their standing with Harrison's elite family. I look down at the dark wine stain covering my chest, and then I look back up into Sylvia's arrogant, triumphant eyes. I do not apologize. I do not scramble to my knees to wipe the floor. I slowly and deliberately set the heavy silver tray down on a nearby side table. I reach into my pocket and pull out a crisp white cotton napkin. I hold the pristine white napkin out, extending my hand directly towards Sylvia. I keep my posture completely straight and my chin held high. "I believe you dropped your drink, Sylvia," I say, my voice ringing with a cold, commanding authority that makes her physically recoil. "You can clean the floor yourself. I will not be doing that for you." Sylvia gasps, her mouth falling open in sheer absolute outrage. Before she can utter a single word of protest, Brittany violently pushes her way to the front of the circle. Her face is flushed a deep mottled red, and her eyes are wide with absolute blinding panic. She is terrified that my sudden defiance will shatter her flawless illusion. "What is wrong with you?" Brittany screams, her shrill voice echoing off the 20-foot ceilings. "You are a socially unfit embarrassment, Ruby. You have always been a complete and utter disaster from the very beginning. You come into my beautiful new house, and you disrespect my future mother-in-law. You are ruining the most important night of my entire life because you are so incredibly jealous of my massive success." She points a shaking finger aggressively toward the grand foyer. "I want you out of my property right now," she demands, her voice cracking with pure venomous rage. "Get out of my house and never come back. You are absolutely dead to this family." The entire room holds its collective breath, waiting for me to run away crying in profound shame. But I do not move a single inch. I stand my ground, my stained shirt feeling like a badge of absolute honor because the trap has finally snapped shut. The heavy silence in the room stretches out second by agonized second. The string quartet playing softly in the background seems to have completely faded away, leaving only the sound of 50 people holding their breath. Sylvia is still standing with her chin raised high, expecting me to crumble into a puddle of tears and run sobbing toward the service entrance. My mother is hovering just a few feet away, her hands clasped tightly together over her chest, her eyes silently begging me to vanish and stop ruining their perfect night. Brittany is glaring at me with her chest heaving, her face a twisted mask of desperate, arrogant rage. But I do not break my posture. I take a slow, deliberate breath, letting the cold, wet sensation of the wine on my shirt ground me entirely in the present moment. I reach my right hand down into the deep pocket of my black catering apron. My fingers brush against the thick, heavy cardstock of the pristine white envelope I placed there earlier this morning. I slowly pull it out into the open. The stark white envelope looks incredibly jarring against the dark wine-stained fabric of my uniform, but I hold it with absolute reverence. I do not look at my mother or my father. I do not even look at Sylvia. I turn my body slightly and lock my eyes directly onto Harrison. He is standing right beside Brittany, looking incredibly uncomfortable and deeply confused by the sheer intensity of the confrontation. He is still trying desperately to play the role of the wealthy, successful fiancé, but the rigid tension in his shoulders betrays his underlying panic. I take one single measured step toward him, extending my hand and holding the crisp white envelope out for him to take. Harrison stares down at the envelope for a long moment, blinking in utter bewilderment. He looks at me and then glances nervously over at Brittany, clearly unsure of what is happening or how he is supposed to react to a server handing him a formal document. Take it, Harrison. I say, my voice perfectly calm and smooth, ringing clearly through the absolute dead silence of the living room. It contains some extremely vital information regarding your future wife and the highly successful lifestyle she has been projecting to you and your family. He hesitantly reaches out his hand, trembling just a fraction of an inch, and takes the envelope from my grasp. Brittany immediately lunges forward, her high heels slipping slightly on the hardwood floor as she tries to block him from opening it. "What are you doing?" she shrieks, her voice shrill and laced with absolute blinding panic. "Do not take anything from her, Harrison. She is completely insane. She is just trying to sabotage us because she is a miserable, bitter failure. Throw it away right now." But Harrison does not throw it away. The sheer desperation in her voice makes him pull his hands back away from her frantic, grasping fingers. He slides his thumb under the unsealed flap of the envelope and pulls out the heavy legal document folded neatly inside. He unfolds the crisp white paper and begins to read the bold black text printed across the top of the page. I watch his eyes dart back and forth across the legal jargon, his brow furrowing in deep, profound confusion. "What is this?" he asks, his voice tight and wavering. He looks up from the paper, staring at Brittany with a mix of dread and suspicion. "It says it is a formal 30-day notice of default and eviction. It has your name on it, Brittany. It says you are 3 months behind on your lease payments." Brittany turns the color of old chalk. All the artificial color completely drains from her contoured face, leaving her looking sickly and terrified. She opens her mouth to speak, but only a strangled, gasping sound escapes her throat. I step forward, ensuring that my voice carries to every single guest standing in the room. Since Brittany is so aggressively kicking me out of her beautiful, spectacular new house, I assume she will not mind me leaving this formal notice regarding her actual apartment. I announce clearly and precisely. She has not paid her rent for her tiny one-bedroom unit in over 90 days. Her landlord has been extremely patient, but the grace period has officially expired tonight. Sylvia lets out a sharp, loud gasp, dropping her empty wine glass onto a nearby side table with a heavy clatter. "What on earth are you talking about?" Sylvia demands, her aristocratic facade cracking completely. "My future daughter-in-law does not rent a tiny apartment. She is a highly successful luxury real estate broker. She owns multi-million-dollar properties. She bought this magnificent estate entirely in cash." Harrison is staring at the eviction notice, his hands gripping the edges of the paper so tightly that the document is beginning to crumple. "The address listed on this default notice is on the south side of the city," he says, his voice barely a whisper. He looks at me, his eyes wide and pleading for an explanation. "How do you even have this document? Why are you the one delivering an eviction notice to my fiancé?" I offer him a cool, utterly detached smile. "Because my firm owns her apartment building too." I say the truth, finally dropping like a massive, heavy boulder into the center of the quiet room. The entire crowd goes completely and utterly dead silent. The revelation hangs in the air, suffocating and undeniable. My parents are standing frozen like statues, their faces masks of pure, unadulterated horror. They are slowly realizing that the narrative they have blindly believed for the past decade is violently unraveling right in front of their eyes. Brittany lets out a visceral, desperate scream. She lunges forcefully at Harrison, grabbing the eviction notice from his hands and aggressively tearing the thick paper into tiny, shredded pieces. She throws the torn scraps onto the floor, breathing heavily like a cornered wild animal. "It is a disgusting lie," she screams, pointing a shaking finger directly at my face. "She printed that on her computer to make me look bad. She is a psychotic, jealous liar. Do not listen to a single word she says. She is just a pathetic house cleaner trying to ruin my life. You have to believe me, Harrison. You have to throw her out. But I am not done yet. I stand perfectly still, letting her manic, desperate screams echo through the grand living room. I slowly raise my right hand and give a small, subtle signal toward the dark shadows of the grand foyer hallway. From the dim lighting, a tall, imposing figure steps forward into the bright glow of the crystal chandeliers. It is Michael, my head of corporate security. He is wearing a flawless, tailored dark suit, his earpiece visible, his posture commanding absolute immediate authority. He walks smoothly across the scratched hardwood floor and comes to a complete stop directly by my side. He does not look at my parents or the wealthy, shocked guests. He looks only at me, waiting for my explicit instruction. I turn my gaze slowly away from my frantic, screaming sister and look directly into the terrified eyes of my father. Actually, it is time for all of you to leave my own property right now, I announce. The sheer weight of my declaration hits the crowded living room like a physical shockwave. For a brief second, nobody moves or breathes. The wealthy guests simply stare at me, trying to process the impossible words that just left the mouth of the hired catering help. Brittany lets out a high-pitched, hysterical laugh, shaking her head frantically. She looks around the room, making desperate eye contact with her future mother-in-law, and then with my parents. She is completely insane. Brittany shrieks, her voice echoing off the soaring ceilings. Do not listen to a single word she says. She is a jealous, bitter house cleaner who has completely lost her mind. She does not own anything. I do not raise my voice to match her panicked screaming. I do not need to. I turn away from the grand foyer and walk with slow, measured steps directly toward the massive marble kitchen island in the center of the open concept space. The crowd instinctively parts for me, stepping back as if I am suddenly radiating electricity. My wine-stained black shirt no longer looks like a mark of shame. It looks like the uniform of an executioner. I reach the edge of the smooth imported marble counter and turn back to face the sea of stunned guests. My father Richard finally unfreezes from his spot near the window. He marches forward, his face a mask of dark, terrifying fury. Ruby, you have taken this sick joke far enough, he growls, his hands balled into tight, heavy fists at his sides. I warned you about causing a scene. You are leaving this house immediately before I drag you out myself. I reach into the inner pocket of my black slacks, completely ignoring his empty, aggressive threat. My fingers wrap around a thick, folded legal document that I personally retrieved from my corporate vault this morning. I pull it out into the bright light of the kitchen chandeliers. I unfold the heavy parchment paper, smoothing the creases with deliberate, absolute precision. I lay the document flat on the center of the marble island, right next to a tray of untouched caviar appetizers. I press my palm flat against the paper and look directly at Harrison, who is watching me with wide, terrified eyes. This is the certified original deed to 4200 Shoreline Drive. I say, my voice ringing with crystal clear authority. It officially registers this $12 million estate under the ownership of Pinnacle Estate Holdings. If you look at the bottom of the page, you will see the notarized signature of the Chief Executive Officer. That signature is mine. Harrison steps forward, cautiously drawn by the magnetic pull of the truth. He leans over the marble island, his eyes scanning the dense legal text and the heavy embossed corporate seals. His face drains of all remaining color as he reads my printed name, clearly listed as the sole corporate owner of the property. He looks up at Brittany, his expression twisting into a mask of profound horror and confusion. Brittany, what is this? He asks, his voice trembling slightly. Why does her name match the corporate ownership records for the house you said you bought? Brittany lunges forward, her high heels slipping wildly on the hardwood floor. She tries to snatch the heavy parchment paper off the counter, but Michael, my head of security, steps smoothly into her path. He does not touch her, but his massive, imposing frame completely blocks her access to the island. Brittany recoils, her chest heaving as she realizes she is physically trapped. It is a fake, she screams, pointing a shaking, manicured finger at the deed. She printed that garbage off the internet. She is a struggling broke maid. She does not own a corporate real estate firm. She does not own this house. Harrison, you have to believe me. She is just trying to destroy our perfect wedding because she is dying of jealousy. My mother, Patricia, finally snaps out of her shocked paralysis. She pushes her way to the front of the crowd, her face flushed with maternal outrage. She stands shoulder to shoulder with Brittany, presenting a fiercely united front against me. You have lost your absolute mind, Ruby. Patricia spits, her voice dripping with venomous contempt. How dare you come into your sister's beautiful new home and fabricate such a disgusting, malicious lie? You are fabricating documents to steal her joy. We all know exactly who you are. You live in a cheap rented apartment, and you clean toilets for a living. You could never in a million years afford a single square foot of this magnificent property. You are a complete fraud. I offer my mother a cold, hollow smile. The irony of her accusation is almost too perfect. I am not the fraud in this room, Mom. I reply, my tone perfectly, even and detached. Your golden child is a struggling luxury real estate broker who has not closed a single commission in 6 months. She used her professional credentials to steal a digital lockbox code from the regional listing service. She has been illegally trespassing inside my vacant corporate asset for 3 weeks, staging unauthorized personal gatherings to convince all of you that she is a wealthy multimillionaire. She is squatting in a house she cannot even afford to rent, let alone buy in cash. The murmurs ripple through the wealthy crowd of guests. The real estate colleagues Brittany invited are exchanging knowing, suspicious glances, whispering behind their hands. They understand exactly how lockbox codes work, and the devastating reality of my accusation is rapidly sinking in. Patricia shakes her head aggressively, refusing to let her perfect illusion shatter. That is an absolute lie, Patricia screams, slamming her hand down on the marble counter. Brittany would never do something so illegal and desperate. You have no proof of these insane accusations. You are just a bitter, vindictive liar trying to ruin her engagement. Show us the proof or get out of her house right now. I nod slowly, acknowledging her desperate demand. You want proof, Mom? I ask, my voice dropping to a soft, dangerous whisper. I am more than happy to provide it. I reach into my other pocket and pull out my sleek, modern smartphone. I unlock the screen and open the proprietary security application linked directly to the hidden cameras Michael installed earlier this week. I tap the screen, navigating to the wireless casting options. Within seconds, my phone syncs perfectly with the massive 85-inch smart television mounted on the wall in the center of the living room. The screen flickers to life, drawing the eyes of every single person in the house. The television displays a crystal-clear, high-definition video feed of the very grand foyer we are all currently standing in. The timestamp in the corner of the video shows it was recorded late last Tuesday night. The 50 guests watch in absolute mesmerizing silence as the heavy wrought iron front doors on the screen swing open. The video shows Brittany sneaking into the dark, empty house. She is wearing sweatpants and a messy bun, looking nothing like the glamorous, wealthy hostess standing in the room today. She punches a sequence of numbers into the digital security keypad by the door. The loud, distinct beep of the lockbox access code echoes through the speakers of the television. The video cuts to a different angle, showing Brittany standing right here in the kitchen, holding her smartphone to her ear. The hidden camera microphones pick up her voice with flawless, terrifying clarity. I got the access code for the Shoreline property, the digital Brittany says, laughing wickedly into her phone. The firm thinks I am doing a private showing for a tech executive, but the place is completely vacant. Harrison is totally buying it. He actually believes I bought this monster of a house in cash. I am bringing the cheap rental furniture in on Saturday morning to stage the main rooms for the party. As long as nobody from Pinnacle Estate Holdings drives by to check on the listing, I am totally in the clear. Once we are married, his trust fund will cover everything anyway, and I can pretend I sold this place for a profit. The video stops, pausing on a high-definition freeze frame of Brittany's arrogant, laughing face. The silence that crashes down over the living room is so incredibly heavy, it feels like it might physically crush us all. The irrefutable, undeniable visual and audio proof of her massive deception hangs massively in the air. There is no spinning this narrative. There is no blaming my jealousy or claiming I fabricated legal documents. Everyone in the room has just watched Brittany joyfully confess to federal trespassing and a highly calculated romantic con. I lock my phone and slip it calmly back into my pocket. I look at my mother, whose jaw is hanging completely open, her eyes darting frantically between the frozen image of her golden child on the television and the pale, trembling reality of my sister standing right beside her. The guests stare in absolute shock, their champagne glasses frozen mid-air. The devastating truth is completely undeniable now. The grand illusion of their perfect, wealthy, elite family has been violently, permanently ripped away, leaving only the ugly, desperate truth fully exposed under the bright crystal chandeliers. Harrison is the first person to break the heavy, suffocating silence. He takes a massive step backward away from Brittany, as if she has suddenly caught a highly contagious disease. He looks from the frozen image of her on the massive television screen, down to the torn pieces of the eviction notice scattered across the hardwood floor, and finally over to the certified corporate deed resting on the marble island. The pieces of the puzzle aggressively snap together in his mind. The subtle tension that has been radiating from his shoulders all night instantly morphs into pure, unadulterated outrage. "You lied to me," Harrison shouts, his voice cracking with a mixture of profound shock and deep, bitter anger. He points an accusing finger directly at her chest. "You brought me into this house and told me you bought it in cash. You told me you were a highly successful real estate magnate. You said you had a massive portfolio of luxury properties. It was all a complete fabrication. You do not own anything. You are just a broke broker who stole a security code." Brittany reaches out for him, her hands grasping desperately at the lapels of his expensive tailored suit jacket. "Harrison, please listen to me," she begs, her voice dropping its arrogant tone and taking on a shrill, frantic pitch. "I can explain everything. I just wanted everything to be absolutely perfect for us tonight. I wanted to impress your family so much. I do have money, my parents have money, we are going to be fine. I promise you we can still have our beautiful life together." Sylvia lets out a harsh, booming laugh that cuts through the desperate pleading. It is a cruel, unforgiving sound. "Impress my family." Sylvia repeats, sneering, as she looks Brittany up and down with absolute unfiltered disgust. "You thought you could impress the upper echelon of Chicago society by squatting in a vacant corporate listing like a common criminal. You paraded us through this magnificent property, claiming you custom designed the architecture while you were secretly facing an eviction notice on a tiny apartment. You are a pathetic, classless fraud." Harrison roughly pushes Brittany's hands off his suit jacket, his face twisting into an ugly, hateful snarl. "Do not touch me," he snaps, taking another step back. "I cannot believe I wasted the last 6 months of my life playing this ridiculous game with you. I thought I was merging my life with a woman of genuine substance and massive financial resources. If I had known you were a struggling broke liar facing a looming eviction, I never would have bought you that ring. I never would have proposed to you." I clear my throat softly, drawing the undivided attention of the furious couple. "Actually, Harrison," I say, my voice perfectly calm and steady, cutting smoothly through his self-righteous anger. "While we are on the highly relevant topic of massive fraudulent behavior and deeply desperate lies, I believe there is something else that firmly belongs in the center of this conversation." I reach into the inner pocket of my plain black uniform and pull out a thick manila folder. I do not hand it to him. I walk slowly around the edge of the marble island and hand the heavy file directly to my sister. Brittany looks down at the folder in her shaking hands, her tear-filled eyes darting up to meet mine in sheer, unadulterated terror. She knows that whatever I am handing her is going to be incredibly devastating. "Open it, Brittany," I command softly. It is a comprehensive financial background check that my corporate intelligence division ran on your incredibly successful wealthy tech entrepreneur fiancé earlier this week. I thought you might want to know exactly who you are planning to marry, since you are both so deeply committed to absolute honesty and total transparency. Harrison suddenly freezes, his entire body going completely rigid. The righteous anger instantly drains out of his face, leaving behind a look of sheer, blinding panic. "Wait," he stammers, taking a frantic, aggressive step toward my sister. "Brittany, do not look at that. She is just trying to manipulate you. She is trying to tear us apart out of pure spite. Give that back to me right now. But Brittany is already rapidly opening the folder. She flips past the executive summary, and her eyes land directly on the highlighted financial disclosures, carefully documented by my investigative team. The room watches in rapt, breathless silence as her expression shifts rapidly from devastating heartbreak to profound, total confusion, and finally to absolute blinding, incandescent rage. She looks up from the pages, her chest heaving violently. "You are bankrupt," she whispers, the heavy word echoing sharply through the quiet living room. She flips to the next page, her hands shaking so aggressively the thick paper rattles. "You carry over $300,000 in hidden business debt. Your tech company collapsed a year ago. You have maxed out 6 different credit cards just in the last 90 days. Even the car you drove here tonight is 3 months behind on its lease payments." Sylvia lets out a loud, horrified gasp, covering her mouth with her shaking hand. Her own son kept his massive financial ruin a complete secret from her, too. The arrogant, aristocratic facade she wore all night shatters completely as the humiliating reality of her son's pathetic situation is exposed to dozens of wealthy guests. Brittany drops the folder onto the floor and steps toward Harrison, her face contorted into a mask of vicious, terrifying fury. "You broke, disgusting liar," she screams, hitting him hard in the chest with both of her hands. "You told me you were a multimillionaire. You told me you were finalizing a massive corporate merger. You made me believe you were going to provide a lavish luxury lifestyle for me. The ring you gave me is completely fake, is it not? You bought it on a maxed-out credit card." Harrison grabs her wrists, pushing her away forcefully, his own anger flaring back up to match hers. "You do not get to judge me, you psychotic hypocrite," he yells back at her, his voice cracking. "You lied about owning a $12 million house. You dragged my family here to celebrate in a property you broke into. I only stayed with you because I thought you had the cash to help me clear my business debts. I thought you were a wealthy real estate heiress. If you are just a broke squatter facing an eviction notice, then what is the point of this entire relationship?" The sheer naked transactional nature of their romance is finally laid completely bare for the entire world to see. They are not two people deeply in love. They are two desperate, drowning con artists who firmly believed they had successfully hooked a wealthy target. They were actively scamming each other, clinging to a sinking ship, while aggressively lying about owning the ocean. A vicious, humiliating screaming match erupts between the happy couple right in the middle of my imported Brazilian hardwood floors. Brittany is shrieking at the top of her lungs, calling him a pathetic failure and a worthless deadbeat. Harrison is shouting right back, calling her a delusional gold digger and a pathetic fraud. The guests watch them tear each other apart in absolute, completely stunned silence. The vicious argument between Brittany and Harrison tears through the living room until Richard slams his palm against the marble island. The sharp crack cuts through their shouting and forces every face toward him. His expression is no longer merely angry. It is desperate. He can feel the family name collapsing, and he is reaching for the authority that once made everyone obey. "That is enough," Richard roars. "Ruby, you will shut this down right now. Turn off that television, collect these ridiculous papers, and tell everyone this was a misunderstanding. You have humiliated your sister and disgraced this family long enough." Patricia grips his arm. Her tears are not for me, but for the status she can feel slipping away. "Think about what you are doing," she pleads. "If this leaves the room, Brittany will never recover. Whatever anger you have toward us does not justify destroying your own blood." I understand how little has changed. Even with Brittany's confession frozen on the television, they are asking me to protect the people who harmed me. This is not a misunderstanding, I say. It is a documented pattern of unauthorized entry property damage, professional misconduct, and deliberate fraud. Brittany jerks her head toward me. "You cannot prove fraud," she screams. "I never signed anything. I only borrowed the house for one party." Michael places a slim black evidence folder beside the deed. I open it. Inside are access logs, damaged photographs, rental messages, and a document recovered by my legal team. "You did more than borrow a house," I say. 3 days ago, you emailed Harrison a falsified copy of the ownership record. You removed Pinnacle Estate Holdings from the first page and replaced it with your own name. You also created a fake proof of funds letter, claiming the purchase had closed through a private trust. Harrison stares at Brittany. Sylvia takes another step away. That was only to make the surprise feel real, Brittany stammers. It was not official. It became evidence the moment you used it to make another person rely on a false claim of ownership, I reply. My general counsel David reviewed the entire file this morning. The access logs, altered deed, false proof of funds, and damage are preserved with verified timestamps. Patricia's face twists with outrage. You had lawyers investigating your own sister behind our backs. No, Mom. My company investigated illegal access to a $12 million asset. Brittany happened to be the broker abusing the code. I place a second envelope on the island bearing the letterhead of Pinnacle's litigation firm. The Regional Real Estate Commission received a formal ethics complaint at 5 o'clock this afternoon. I continue. Brittany's brokerage received notice that her credentials were used for unauthorized access. Our attorneys also submitted the evidence package to the Lake Forest Police Department and requested charges for criminal trespass, property damage, and fraud. Prosecutors will decide the counts, but the complaint is filed and the evidence is beyond your control. Brittany makes a broken, choking sound. You planned this before the party. I prepared for it before the party, I correct her. You planned the crime. Richard moves around the island until he stands only a few feet from me. His face is dark red and his hands are trembling. You think owning a few houses makes you untouchable, he says. I have spent 30 years building banking relationships. One phone call from me, and every lender in Chicago will know Pinnacle is run by a vindictive, unstable woman. I can destroy your access to credit, he continues. I can call the executives who financed your acquisitions. By Monday morning, your little empire will be bleeding cash, and you will understand what happens when you challenge your father. For the first time that evening, I laugh. It is not loud, but it stops him. Richard. I say you should have checked who purchased the commercial loan on your manufacturing company before threatening my access to credit. His expression freezes. Michael hands me a third document. I place it directly in front of my father. Across the top is the formal assignment agreement, transferring his company's primary secured loan from Lakeshore Commercial Bank to Pinnacle Capital Recovery, a wholly owned subsidiary of Pinnacle Estate Holdings. 8 weeks ago, your lender classified the loan as distressed, I explain. Your company violated its debt service covenant, missed 2 scheduled payments, and pledged equipment against a second line of credit without proper disclosure. Lakeshore wanted the exposure off its books. My acquisition team purchased the entire loan at a discount. Richard looks down at the pages. His eyes move over the account number, the outstanding principal, and the bank officer's signature. His mouth opens, but no sound comes out. That is impossible, he whispers. Martin Hale would have called me. I have known him for 20 years. Martin works for the bank, I say. He protects the bank. He does not protect you. Patricia leans over the document and loses what remains of her color. What does this mean, Richard, she asks. He does not answer, so I do. It means Pinnacle is now the primary secured creditor of Richard's company. The facility equipment, receivables, and controlling shares are tied to this loan. I have the authority to demand a restructuring plan. If the company defaults again, I can accelerate the debt and enforce the collateral. Richard grabs the assignment agreement. You bought my debt to punish me. I bought a distressed commercial asset because it was undervalued and secured by useful property, I reply. I learned the borrower was your company during final diligence and approved the purchase because the numbers justified it. Unlike you, I do not make financial decisions based on which daughter feels special. The sentence lands harder than any scream. Patricia recoils. Brittany stops crying long enough to stare at our father. The guests who listened to Richard brag all evening now look at him with open disbelief. You will release the loan, Richard demands. You will sell it back to me and withdraw every complaint against Brittany. I am your father. You were my father when you threw away my birthday cake, I say. You were my father when you ordered me into the cold with $50 in my pocket. You were my father tonight when you threatened to make me dead to you if I dropped a tray. Biology did not stop you from treating me like disposable labor. It does not give you control of my company now. His hand tightens around the papers. I will fight you in court. David anticipated that response, I say. Every document was reviewed by independent counsel. The loan transfer is valid. The collateral filing is perfected. And because you threatened to use banking relationships to retaliate against Pinnacle in front of 50 witnesses, those remarks will be preserved as well. Several people lower their eyes. Richard realizes the room he tried to dominate has become a room full of witnesses. Michael touches his earpiece and listens. Then he looks at me. The officers are at the gate, he says. They have confirmed the complaint number and are ready to enter. I nod once. The final trace of authority drains from my father's posture. Patricia clutches his sleeve. Brittany remains on the floor beside the scattered pages of Harrison's report. They look smaller because every lie beneath them has been removed. I turn toward the front doors. Let them in, I say. The front doors open less than a minute later. Two uniformed Lake Forest police officers step into the grand foyer with a third waiting outside. Their calm, professional presence strips the last trace of fantasy from the room. Michael introduces himself as Director of Security for Pinnacle Estate Holdings. He provides the incident number property records and verified access logs. I remain beside the marble island, while the senior officer studies them and looks toward the frozen image of Brittany on the television. Who represents the property, he asks. I reply. Ruby, founder and chief executive officer of Pinnacle Estate Holdings. I authorized the complaint, and I am withdrawing permission for every unauthorized person connected to this event to remain. The officer turns toward the guests. The property owner has asked that the premises be cleared. You are not being accused of knowingly participating in the unauthorized access, but you must collect your belongings and leave in an orderly manner. The room erupts into movement. There is no elegant farewell and no final champagne toast. Conversations dissolve into embarrassed whispers as people reach for coats and handbags. Brittany's real estate colleagues move fastest. They understand the commission investigation will begin with interviews, and none wants to appear connected to her lockbox abuse. The musicians pack in silence. The outside servers leave through the service entrance, while my authorized catering team remains in the kitchen. Within minutes, the party meant to establish Brittany as a member of Chicago's elite becomes a line of guests desperate to escape the scandal. Sylvia pulls her fur coat around her shoulders and grabs Harrison's arm. We are leaving, she says, her voice thin and shaken. Harrison looks at the fake ring on Brittany's hand and then at the financial report on the floor. He removes the ring with one abrupt motion. That belongs to the credit company more than either of us, he says, dropping it onto the island. Brittany lunges after him. Harrison, please. We can fix this. My parents will help us. Ruby is doing this because she has always hated me. He turns once. I stayed because I thought you could rescue me. You stayed because you thought I could rescue you. There was never anything else here. He follows Sylvia outside without looking back. Brittany watches him disappear and her knees buckle. She collapses beside the torn eviction notice, her white dress folding around her like ruined paper. You did this to me, she screams. You waited until everyone was here because you wanted to destroy me. No, Brittany, I say. I waited because those were the people you chose to deceive. The audience belonged to you. So did the consequences. The senior officer approaches her. Ma'am, you need to stand and collect your personal property. You are being removed based on the owner's complaint. You will receive instructions regarding the investigation after you leave. This is my house, Brittany shrieks. The officer glances at the certified deed. The ownership records do not support that statement. Michael retrieves Brittany's handbag and coat. When she refuses to stand, the officer repeats the instruction firmly. Patricia rushes toward her, but the second officer blocks her path. Do not touch my daughter, Patricia cries. She is emotionally devastated. She is not under arrest at this moment, the officer replies. She is being formally trespassed from the property. Interfering will not help her. Richard remains near the island, holding the loan assignment, as though it weighs more than the marble beneath it. He no longer threatens me. The numbers have silenced him. His eyes move between the officer's departing guests and the document controlling his company's future. For the first time, he looks at me without contempt. What I see instead is fear. Michael helps Brittany stand without unnecessary force. Her makeup is streaked and the hem of her dress drags through the red wine Sylvia spilled earlier. Every detail she claimed as her own now stands as evidence against her. As she is escorted toward the entrance, Patricia rushes toward me. Her face has collapsed into desperate panic. She reaches for my hands, but I step back. "Ruby, please," she says. "We are your family. Drop the complaint. Tell the officers this was a misunderstanding. Your sister has lost her fiancé, and her career may be destroyed. Is that not enough?" I study the woman who threw my 20th birthday cake into the trash because Brittany had been rejected by a man she barely knew. I remember the gifts placed in my sister's lap, the duffel bag, and the frozen driveway. Family loyalty. Patricia continues. "We are your blood. You cannot turn your back on us when Brittany needs you most." 13 years earlier, those words might have broken me. Tonight they sound empty. "I am sorry, Mom," I say. "You just do not feel special enough today." Her hand flies to her chest. She finally understands that I remember the exact language she used to erase me, and that I will never again accept the role she assigned. Richard steps beside her but says nothing. The officer holds the door while Michael escorts Brittany across the threshold. Patricia follows, sobbing. Richard trails behind them with the loan papers clenched in his fist. At the front steps, Brittany turns and looks back at me. Her expression carries hatred, disbelief, and a final hope that I will change my mind. I do not. The doors close. The officers finish recording statements and confirm that my legal team will be contacted the following morning. When they leave, the estate becomes quiet. Rented furniture still crowds the rooms and torn documents cover the floor, but the suffocating performance is gone. I walk to the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the dark water of Lake Michigan. Scattered lights trace the distant shoreline. Behind me, my employees secure the property and document the damage. I place one hand against the cool glass and breathe. For 13 years, I believed leaving that house at 20 meant I had lost my family. Standing inside the empire I built without them, I finally understand the truth. I did not lose a home that night. I escaped one. 6 months pass rapidly after the disastrous engagement party. The legal and financial consequences for my family are swift, severe, and absolutely unrelenting. Brittany is formally convicted of felony trespassing and corporate fraud. She avoids actual prison time by accepting a highly restrictive plea deal, but her professional reputation is permanently, utterly destroyed. The Regional Real Estate Commission immediately revokes her broker license, and she is forced to move out of my building, taking up residence in a tiny rundown studio apartment on the far outskirts of the city. Without her fake wealthy lifestyle to hide behind, she completely disappears from the elite social circles she so desperately craved. My father's arrogant, sprawling manufacturing business collapses completely under the heavy, crushing weight of his massive commercial debt. True to my word, I aggressively call in the loan, forcing him into immediate severe corporate restructuring. My holding company quietly absorbs his most valuable remaining assets, stripping him of all his former executive power. He is forced into an early, humiliating retirement. My parents are required to sell their massive suburban colonial home to cover their mounting legal fees and their substantial personal debts, downsizing to a modest condo that Patricia constantly bitterly complains about. Their carefully constructed, flawless public image is completely shattered, leaving them isolated and exposed to the harsh judgments of their former country club friends. I do not revel in their misery, but I also do not offer a single shred of sympathy or financial assistance. I maintain absolute strict no contact, allowing the natural, brutal consequences of their own toxic choices to play out entirely without my interference. I focus all my formidable energy and resources on exactly what matters most, building my empire and cultivating my own genuine happiness. I watch my father's face turn a sickly shade of gray. Richard is the majority owner and chief executive of a mid-sized manufacturing company that has been quietly losing money for years. His salary and public status look impressive, but the business is buried beneath commercial loans, equipment financing, and overdue obligations. At home, he is also drowning in mortgage payments and country club fees. He does not have $300,000 in liquid cash. He may not even have 30,000 available without borrowing against something he has already pledged. I am hosting a massive lavish celebration in my own home, surrounded entirely by the incredible supportive chosen family I have meticulously built over the past decade. My loyal, dedicated employees are here raising glasses of genuine vintage champagne to my continued health and massive success. My closest, dearest friends, the people who stood by me when I was scrubbing floors and eating cheap noodles, are dancing happily near the infinity pool. And standing right beside me, his hand resting warmly and supportively on my lower back, is David, my lead corporate attorney. We have been quietly dating for the past 8 months, building a partnership based on absolute mutual respect, fierce loyalty, and profound genuine affection. He looks at me with an expression of deep, unwavering admiration, completely understanding and celebrating the strong, independent woman I have fought so hard to become. I wear a stunning, custom-tailored emerald green silk dress that flows beautifully around me. I hold a delicate crystal flute of champagne, letting the bubbles tickle my nose. I look out over the crowded, joyful room, taking in the incredible life I have built entirely on my own terms. I am completely untouched by the toxic, suffocating shadow of the golden child or the heavy, crushing weight of my parents' conditional love. I am the absolute, undisputed architect of my own magnificent destiny. Michael, my head of security, catches my eye from across the room and offers a small, respectful nod, ensuring everything is running with perfect, flawless precision. I smile back at him, raising my glass in a silent, grateful toast. I turn my gaze toward the massive floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out over the calm, peaceful waters of the lake. The reflection staring back at me is radiant, powerful, and completely free. My empire is solid, my heart is full, and my future is absolutely limitless. I take a slow, deeply satisfying sip of my champagne, perfectly content in the knowledge that I am finally exactly where I truly belong. Looking back on the night that shattered my family's illusion, the greatest lesson I learned wasn't about the power of wealth or the brief satisfaction of revenge. It was a profound realization about self-worth. For 13 years, I allowed my parents and my sister to